What's going on, NFL fans, NFL draft fans, and welcome to the Draft Network's 2022 NFL Draft coverage. We welcome you to the Draft Network Scouting Department's Draft Room. I have the TDN scouting team with me here, and we are getting ready for the Jacksonville Jaguars to end the mystery regarding the number 1 overall pick. So I guess I would open this conversation to all of you guys first and foremost. Who do you expect this pick to be? I know we obviously put our predictive mocks in. We had some different answers at number 1. Seemed like for a really long time it was Aidan Hutchinson. The last 2 weeks has shifted to Trayvon Walker. What do we think?
I think that just from the process of elimination, since they re-signed Cam, I think they're certainly going edge, and my pick would be Aidan Hutchinson.
Ooh, Dre, I didn't know I had an ally here because I also have Aidan Hutchinson, and everyone else is on the Trayvon Walker train, I'm pretty sure. So it's nice to have an ally right here in Dre Harris.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, is the question who do we think is going to go 1 or who should go number 1? Because I think that's 2 different answers. Who do I think is going to go 1 is Trayvon Walker. And that's kind of where all the signs have been pointing, all the people in the league are saying that's what's going to happen. So I have no reason not to believe that. That being said, who I think should go 1 should be Aidan Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau. It should not be Trayvon Walker, but, I guess that's up to GM Trent Baalke.
Well, let's talk about that. What is the resume and the case for Trayvon Walker, aside of the Alden Smith, Trent Baalke arm length connection? Like let's talk about Trayvon Walker, the football player, and what you're betting on when you draft him with that number 1 overall pick.
I'll just say Alden Smith could actually bend the edge, and he was more than just a long, explosive athlete. He had rare flexibility. Trayvon Walker does not have that.
Well, I disagree. I love the Trayvon Walker pick if that's what they decide to go with. I think this is a guy that you can kick inside, and we talked about this. He has enough speed and athleticism to overwhelm any interior offensive lineman and be a real interior presence. And we just seen this with the Los Angeles Rams. That guess what? Having that guy in the middle of your defense can really cause havoc, and it immediately disrupts offenses. So if they go Trayvon Walker, I absolutely love it. I think it's the right pick. In the past couple of years, they drafted Caleb Chazon, they drafted Josh Allen, so they've already invested into edge rushers, right? Ooh. So now it's time to get
Let me jump in here, right? Because we're talking about an Alden Smith comp, right? But we're also talking about reducing this guy inside.
Yeah.
So that's not quite the same thing, right?
Two very different things.
Right. So I guess that's the challenge, but I agree with you, Keith, in that reducing Trayvon Walker inside, his appeal, yeah, he's got arm length like Trayvon Walker does, or like Alden Smith does, but his appeal is more the positional versatility in passing situations to get him reduced inside as compared to somebody who's constantly bending the edge like an Alden Smith would do.
Right.
Yeah, and I think everybody, I don't want to say kill this guy, but they knock him because he doesn't necessarily have the sack production, right? But, I mean, if we look at that Georgia defense, which we've all watched extensively because they have so many playmakers on there.
About 30 of them?
Yeah. That he's a guy that, he plays multiple positions, so sometimes he's not even asked to rush the passer. So can you really knock him if he only rushed the passer 30% of his defensive snaps, right? So I think when you put him in position, he has a higher volume of pass rush reps. I think this guy would be off the charts as a football player.
Let me just say, I agree with what Keith was saying. I do think Trayvon Walker's best position at the next level will be inside. I think he does have mismatched potential because of his quickness, his explosiveness, his power, and his length. I just question his ability to consistently win off the edge going against quicker, more fluid offensive tackles that can really get out and get wide and was going to make him turn the corner. I just don't think he can do that. But like I said, I don't think he's going to be a bad player. I just feel like position versatility, you want a guy who's going to be that double-digit sack guy, and I don't know if Trayvon Walker will ever be that.
And to that point, then I counter with the same questions about Aidan Hutchinson. Can he consistently bend off the edge, the poor arm length?
I saw this tweet the other week. I was wondering if this was going to come up here at the table.
We watched the tape. We've done our work, and that's something that shows up on tape. He's a guy that when he gets close to, I would say, more technically sound offensive tackles, their punch timing and their length comes into play. Once they land and latch and they extend, now it's the relentlessness, it's the club, it's the rip, it's all the different counter moves that get free. And Michigan gave him a lot of opportunities with manufactured space at the line of scrimmage. A lot of wide angles to help him sell the outside path and then cut inside. He has some bend issues as well. So I also look at him as somebody that he's so quick inside, in that kind of 4-eye, getting into those gaps. They have very similar issues and then very similar strengths at the same time. When I look at Trayvon Walker, that arm length, that physicality, that athleticism are things you really can't teach. So I'm not sure right now the defense that they're running. I can't remember if it's a 4-3 or 3-4, but if it is the 4-3, I'm cool with him playing him at the end. Tight ends aren't going to block him. He's going to make sure to stack, peek, and shed, shut down the run game in those edges, and like you said, reduce him inside, get him in that short path against these guards, and let's get after the quarterback.
I think what's really fun is the dynamic of him with Josh Allen on the same defense.
Yes.
And one of the comparisons that I actually like for Trayvon Walker is a guy who went in the early second round, but Emmanuel Ogbah, who's now with the Miami Dolphins, who plays odd front, he plays even front. You were talking about 3-4, 4-3. Who cares, right? Like he could be the base end with his hand in the dirt, or you can walk somebody up outside of him. So you think about Josh Allen walked up outside this dude lined up on inside on an offensive tackle, and you want to try. You're going to be sliding protection that way, right? Like you need all the help you can get. Okay, so now you got DeJuan Smoot on the other side in designated pass rush situations, who's a pretty good pass rusher himself. So I think the versatility of those two guys is what you're selling, if that is the pick.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Aidan Hutchinson, because you mentioned, some inconsistencies in both of their games as far as how they win as rushers. I do think what is interesting is, despite I agree with you that the bend is not one of Aidan's greatest traits,
right,
and length is not either, but this is somebody who has a very proficient pass rush win rate with his consistency in winning at first contact with those initial hand counters.
Right.
Well, I think Aidan Hutchinson is the best player in the draft. And so I just feel like there's so much variety in how he can beat blocks. And so while he doesn't have the long arms that you really want, while you maybe wish he was a little more flexible, he knows how to reduce angles because he has so many different tools to get home in terms of pass rush variety. And I love that. I love the relentless motor. I love the balanced skill set as a run defender and a pass rusher. And I think he just has the makeup of the guy that you're comfortable saying, this is the number one pick in the draft. This is one of the pillars of our organization. And so I love all the boxes that Aidan does check, in addition to not just being great on the field. I think he's going to be such an asset to your entire football operation.
I think I'm about to go ahead, Keith.
No, I would just ask the question, and I think this is the other aspect. We talked about the evaluations, right? Which is also team building. Is an edge rusher, primarily edge rusher like Aidan Hutchinson, is that necessarily a team need for the Jaguars? And because the reason why I bring that up is because, like I said in the past, they've spent draft capital on guys already. So this is about to be 3, and we're just talking about in the first round, right? And so you're gonna invest even more draft capital to that position. So now you're talking about kicking some guy out or trading the early draft pick that you just drafted. So that was kind of the angle that I'm looking for with the Aidan Hutchinson situation.
I would say, some of the teams we've seen compete for Super Bowls that maybe don't have that superstar quarterback. I think about the Giants teams who twice beat Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I think about the Niners in 2019,
Taku,
right?
Samora.
And you think about their defensive lines, right? With Justin Tuck, Osi Umenyiora, Strahan, Kiwanuka. I mean, just being able to roll those guys out. That's really how you build a Super Bowl team if you don't have that top quarterback. Trevor Lawrence might be that guy, but we don't know that.
Right.
And so to answer your question, is it a glaring need? Maybe not. They might have other, maybe more pressing needs. But the idea of adding Aidan Hutchinson and pairing him with Josh Allen, Caleb Chason, you're able to potentially kick Aidan Hutchinson inside, can have a NASCAR package and really get after the quarterback. I think that's smart, especially picking number 1, especially in a draft where, look, ideally they get out of the pick. Let's be real. Ideally they get out of the pick, but no one is trading for a quarterback. So if you're going to stick and pick, I think defensive end, edge rusher, I think that makes a lot of sense.
You know what Jacksonville needs? They need culture changers, right? You're just getting out of the Urban Meyer experience, and I think that's probably the best way I would describe it, was an experience, right? So Aidan Hutchinson, obviously you know what kind of football character. We got a chance to get to know him fairly well and got to know his preparation habits, how seriously he takes taking care of his body, making sure he's putting the right things into his body from a preparation standpoint. And he helped change that Michigan program that was kind of stuck in neutral on that plateau for so long. For being a first-round pick to come back and all of a sudden Michigan's in the college football playoff. So I think that's certainly a dynamic of Aidan Hutchinson's resume that helps build a firm argument for him to be the selection at number 1.
Well, I think that's a great point. They need to hit on the entire package, right? They can't go back to the issues that they had with Urban Meyer. And I'm not saying that a different player would present those issues, but Aidan Hutchinson is just everything that you're looking for in terms of a face of your draft class, face of your franchise. And for a Jacksonville team that needs a lot of that goodwill right now, and I think that they made a great hire in Doug Peterson to be the head coach. Now you kind of couple that with an Aidan Hutchinson. I think that's a phenomenal way to really jumpstart this football team. Now, look, I understand that most people don't think he's going to be the pick.
Yeah.
But I think he should, and Dre's in on that as well.
Absolutely.
But we'll see what actually
Would you
happens.
guys consider anybody else with this pick? I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about these
Yes.
two edge rushers. I mean, Keith brings up the point, like, hey, from a pure team needs perspective, edge probably isn't
Right.
the most pressing need on the roster.
I think if they
go ahead.
Sorry, D. I think if they hadn't signed Cam, I think that Neal would have been someone to consider with the number 1 overall pick. But since they re-signed Cam Robinson, I certainly think they're going to go edge for sure.
I would counter that. I would still go Evan Neal because the right side isn't solidified. Jawan Taylor was a first round pick a couple years ago. He has not lived
Early
up
two.
to early two.
Early
He
two.
was projected to be first round and
Yes.
he dropped.
Yes.
He hasn't lived up to that yet, right? And the main thing that you want to do is not just protect Trevor Lawrence, but of course I'm the running back of all of us. You also want to get the run game going as well.
Sure.
You want to dominate in the trenches. And I always say if you have 2 tackles that you can trust, you can combo and dual block in the inside, you can help each other, and that gives Trevor not just, okay, I know that my edges are protected, but now I know my lap is protected. And that was the one thing I said last night is for a quarterback, you want to make sure you got a napkin right there. So when he's eating, he's not dropping food there. He's not messing up he's not messing his pants up. You don't want to have guys be able to get into the teeth of that offensive line and disrupt him, because that's the quickest path to the quarterback, right? Think about who they're facing as well. They have to see DeForest Buckner, one of the most dominant interior defensive linemen in football. So, if I can get an Evan Neal who has that experience playing the right and the left, you got Cam Robinson, fine. Let's go ahead and improve that right side. Maybe, because the whole key with the offensive line, let's get the best 5 out there. Mm-hmm. Maybe Jawan Taylor's better inside. Who knows? But you attack that in camp. If he's not, then you know that you can move on from him. But that's my ideal pick for them. Let's improve the offensive trenches because, like Keith has said, they spend a lot of draft capital on the edges already.
So they did sign Brandon Scherf in free agency, but they lost both starting guards
Yes.
from last year's team as things currently stand.
Was it Andrew Norwell?
And A.J. Kane. Yeah, so, I mean, they've got significant turnover and attrition on that side of the ball on the trenches, but they're taking their good old time here, guys. I don't know. We trying to milk a trade out here at the last minute?
Well,
or?
they get the spotlight, right?
Yeah,
This is their opportunity to be the
Right.
number 1 pick and have all the positive discussion about the organization. So even when it was chalk last year with Trevor Lawrence, first time the organization ever had the first pick, they took all the time. So I expect them to do it again.
Yeah, milk it, right?
I will say real quick, kind of back to the offensive line potential in terms of maybe they should have considered offensive linemen. I think there's an opportunity cost with every one of these picks.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm. You select an edge, whether that's Trayvon Walker, whether that's Aidan Hutchinson. Okay, now you're missing out on Ikem Ekwonu or Evan Neal. Mm-hmm. Maybe they want to go offensive tackle with their first pick in round 2. Mm-hmm. The options at offensive tackle with the pick number 33 isn't going to be great.
No.
But if they go Ikem Ekwonu or Evan Neal at 1, they might be able to come around to 33 and get Armand Bacchetti, Boye Mafe, etc. So I mean, I think they're gonna pick an edge, but I think that's another argument why maybe they should have gave it a little more thought.
That's a great excuse to look over at TDN. We got our consensus top 275 as things currently stand, and as this weekend evolves, we'll continue to put more names on this list. But I mean, you can see there in that offensive tackle evaluation from our perspective, you really only have 4 names in the first 2 rounds combined. That void there for those offensive tackles, it's egregious. And based on positional value, some of those guys that we kind of have graded as fringe 2-3s, they're going to go earlier, right? But look at the edge group. Look how much more busy that
Pretty
edge group
deep.
is in those first 3 buckets. You have so much more value, to Brentley's point, that is available. I am sure that the team would have a really hard time swallowing the pill or the idea of we're going to draft whether it's Evan Neal or Ikem Ekwonu and maybe play him at right tackle, or you need two good tackles these days, but either play him at right tackle or potentially play him at offensive guard. Like that's just not something that you're doing with that number 1 overall pick. So I'm sure that's a part of this conversation Jacksonville's having as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's very interesting the things we've talked about here. It almost makes you want to re-ask the question now, right? I mean, who do we think will be the number 1 overall pick now? Because we've talked about every scenario and so forth. But my pick isn't changing, but I know that it may have changed the minds of others.
I know the best player in this draft is still Kyle Hamilton. I don't care what way he ran.
Thank you.
Jacksonville needs playmakers, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that from a ball production standpoint, Hamilton had 8 interceptions, but he's not a true center fielder. But, I mean, just to have an excuse to bring kind of a new name to the table here, he's my top prospect. Like, he would certainly be somebody
Same here.
that I would consider. But the pick is in.
Wow.
Gentlemen,
Okay,
we have the
okay.
pick. All we had to do was bring a new talking point. They're like, all right, we'll go ahead and make the pick. So, with the first overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars have selected defensive end.
Come on.
Trayvon Walker from the University of Georgia. So we're going to head over to the draft board. This is our first opportunity to kind of showcase this dynamic of the TDN draft room for 2022. And we have all our player cards, and they're color-coded for their round grade, and they're color-coded for day 1, day 2, and day 3. And Trayvon Walker here was our 4th-rated edge defender in this year's class. We're going to take him off the board. There he is. And what this gives us the opportunity to do is give you a chance to see the true value as dictated by our prospect rankings at any given time in the draft. And it also gives us a chance to showcase draft classes as they are being assembled. The Jacksonville Jaguars with Trayvon Walker with that first overall selection. So, turns out the buzz from the last couple of weeks has been true.
Yes.
Trent Baalke has won the battle, right? We heard Ikem Ekwonu and Trent Baalke, or Ikem Ekwonu and Doug Peterson versus Trent Baalke and Trayvon Walker versus potentially Shad Khan and Aidan Hutchinson has kind of been like the power struggle at play here. Right. And now we get Trayvon Walker off the board.
Isn't that amazing that Trent Baalke wins? Like after head coaches wouldn't take the job because this guy's the general manager.
But that's why he won, because they're invested. They passed on their top how many head coaching candidates because of Trent Baalke.
Yeah.
Who has not had a great track record of drafting, right? I mean,
Right.
All I'm going to say is I think this is – I mean, I've been outspoken. I'm at the highest on Trayvon Walker. I think this is insane. I genuinely think this is insane. He went number 1 overall. I'm shocked. I knew it was going to happen, but, like, now that it actually has happened – I am shocked.
Are you going to be more
insane.
upset when Quay Walker gets drafted before Devin Lloyd tonight?
I mean, maybe, honestly. That's just as crazy if you ask me. That's just as crazy, but this is...
And
I don't know.
This is
same premise.
This is crazy because we're on the same side of the table, but we stand on totally different sides with this pick, man. I think they did what makes sense, and we talk about this all the time, man. Like you said, and I repeated this earlier, y'all spent draft capital on the edges already. I don't believe they see Trayvon Walker as a true edge guy. They're going to play him inside. He's going to dominate the interior. Then he's going to allow them to do multiple things. Last year, Josh Allen's best game, right? I think we had the interception, and he kind of
really, Keith?
Yeah,
really?
You know, I got rolling. I forgot who they were playing against.
You know what his other best game of the year was? 300 yards against the Dolphins in London, too. You don't got to talk to me about him. He's throwing shade at both of us here.
But just to finish the point, it's not going to get any better, right?
I'm fully aware of what happened. So
he intercepted Josh Allen, and the quarterback job, the Buffalo Bills Josh Allen.
Keep going. Strip sack.
And it just showed how multiple he is as a player. So you add Trayvon Walker to that piece, and then now you have just a front that's so multiple in what they can do. So I applaud the pick, and Brentley, I know you're slightly angry.
Insane.
That's
the word was insane.
That's the good thing about scouting. You know, we're all entitled to our opinions, and we all see players differently. But I mean, two people sitting next to each other have completely different opinions.
That's what I love about this group, right? Because we've been doing this since the summertime. You know, we do regional scouting, we do summer scouting, then we watch the prospects throughout the course of the fall, we do regional write-ups, and then we stack it all up and we all watch these guys together and we meet, we talk about what we see. Well, we've had some of these battles, but we haven't had this battle until right now with Jacksonville and Trayvon Walker. So this group and the different opinions is why I love our process, because it gives us a chance to learn lessons from each other, and maybe we get to say I told you so now and again. And I'm looking forward to 3 years from now revisiting this one.
Oh, Dev, I will be sending a text message.
Now let it be known, if they make him a full-time defensive tackle, I'm going to be on board, but I'm still not on board as a
which
number
would make
overall
sense,
pick.
especially with Jonathan Taylor being in that division and the Colts being so run heavy. You need somebody that can plug and play, handle those battles with him. We're going to see what he's made of when he sees Big Q. Right, we're gonna see what he's made of when he sees Big Q for the first time. But I like the pick from that reason. Put him at interior D line. You can, move him around how you want, give you that flexibility. But they have to stop Jonathan Taylor.
The next pick is in.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
So,
The Detroit Lions did not waste any time running the card in.
You know who that is.
Yeah.
You know who that is.
Defensive end Aidan Hutchinson,
course.
University of Michigan,
No question.
is the next pick. So we'll go ahead and we'll head back over to the board here.
My
Aidan
God,
Hutchinson,
just taking a
the
breath of
first
fresh air.
ever defensive rated rookie from our friends over at Panini, was our second rated prospect in this year's class. 6'0", 6'5", 260 pounds, 32 1/8 inch arms, and he has 10 1/4 inch hands. He ran a verified 4.74. So a fairly explosive athlete, and his 3-cone was really impressive as well for all of the discourse that does exist around his bend and ability to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and put him on the board here. Who has some reactions here to Aidan Hutchinson as the first pick for the Detroit Lions?
Makes
Me,
sense.
I think that we said something about this previously too. I think about culture, right? And what Brad Holmes is trying to build there. You get a kid who's from the home state, who's going to come in and play hard and really be able to shift the culture of the Detroit Lions. So from that aspect, he's a day one starter. He's going to be very impactful. So I like this pick for them, and I think it was a no-brainer.
And there's no question about the need. This is the number one need for the Detroit Lions. And so they get a slam dunk player, a premium position, top player on the board, I would argue is probably true for them. I think if they had the number one pick, they would have picked Aidan Hutchinson. So Detroit has to feel really good about how this played out for them.
Yeah, I agree, and it's the fit, right? And you talk about Detroit Lions and them as an organization. Like, they need somebody that has pride in the Detroit Lions, right? Because it's been a while since they've been a truly winning football team. And Aidan Hutchinson, he's going to wear that state on his back, right? Just the state of Michigan is going to mean something to him. And I hate to bring up, just the parallels to LeBron James, but the Cavaliers don't have a championship understand what I'm saying?
I was about to say,
Oh, boy.
That's the GOAT we're talking about.
I'm with you.
Yeah, understand what I'm saying. The hometown thing meant something to LeBron, so that's why
this is for you.
He came back, and I think that the Detroit Lions needed somebody that felt that type of way about the Detroit Lions. Not saying he's
Absolutely.
LeBron
Yeah,
James,
yeah.
but
Absolutely,
just
I totally
the
agree.
scenario.
I just want to say, really kudos to GM Brad Holmes. I mean, you think about what he's able to do in the draft last year, too, with Panay Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think they got Aleem McNeil, too, right?
They
They got some good football
I mean,
players.
they got good football players, and they did it again, right? And what's our motto? Draft good football players. And, I mean, this is how you turn around a franchise. You don't miss.
Right.
The Jaguars have potential to miss with Trayvon Walker. I'm sorry to bring it up again.
No, that's fair.
But that's fair. They have potential to miss.
That's fair.
Detroit
With
too, though.
Detroit, see, I mean, again, yes,
was- yeah,
yes,
let's say,
100%. But for me, I don't see how this pick could potentially be a miss. I think at the end of the day, he'll be at worst 9-sack guy who is excellent in the run game and has potential to be a double-digit sack guy. And so, hitting it out of the park with Panay last year and then Aidan Hutchinson.
They're
Really against high floor
this
players.
Is good. This is good. This is good.
And that's how you build a team, like you said, high floor players.
The only concern that I have about them is that if they're able to score enough points to give him pass rush opportunities, right? I think that's the only concern. But as far as him and his skill set, I think he's going to bring a lot to that team.
All right, so let's shift gears.
Yep.
Let's talk about.
I think this is where the draft starts.
Let's talk about the Houston Texans, right?
Right.
I mean, they are a team that 4-13 last season. You think about the edge pass rusher potential there. We do have Kayvon Thibodeau still on the board as well. Offensive tackle, they have Laramie Tunsil, but the Titus Howard investment hasn't worked out great. A lot of corners mocked. We've heard buzz on both Sauce Gardner. And again, kind of like what Trayvon Walker did with the Jacksonville Jaguars at 1, the buzz the last 2 weeks feels like it shifted to Derek Stingley. So that's an interesting development for us as we get here and get ready to talk about the Houston Texans.
I think it's definitely going to be a corner or an edge, and certainly my top cornerback on my board is Derek Stingley Jr. I think he'd be a great fit. Whoever they pick is going to be a culture fit for that organization.
I'm gonna go over here and get ready to take the card off.
Okay,
board
so
a while.
okay.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if you know already. That's why I'm hesitating.
This must be something here.
Yeah, and Dre, you know we've been on the same. We are on the same side with the Derek
Absolutely.
Stingley pick. If I'm the Houston Texans, I don't think I go corner here, regardless of who it is, right?
Sure.
Because I think just when you have a top corner, you can kind of remove him, right? You could just, if he's playing man to man, you could just motion him out the way and then take advantage.
They didn't get the memo.
Okay.
They didn't get the memo because the pick is in, and the pick is LSU's Derek Stingley.
All right. Sting.
Wow.
CB1, baby.
All right, so
Little
guys, go ahead and
Sting.
talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and ring this card up. Derek Stingley, 6002, 190 pounds, 30 5/8 on the arm, a 9.58 for the hand, a 89.75 consensus grade for our group. This is one of the best prospects that we have graded this year. So I would assume we like the value.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and talk about it.
I mean, I know that it was 2019, and I get it, but the season he put on tape is arguably the best freshman cornerback. Like for a kid to come in at 17 years old and be that technically sound, that intelligent, the ball skills and just to be able to track and attack the ball at the highest point, and the competitiveness, which we've talked about with him and Jamar Chase in practice, and then seeing those reps be leaked out to Twitter. And you talked about how they learned each other, how as this kid at 17 years old was able to basically match Jamar Chase rep after rep after rep. His talent didn't disappear over the past 2 years. This is a great pick in my opinion.
I think that the thing that they are concerned about most, is fit, right? I mean, because they've changed the culture with their new GM and so forth. And I know that this kid, knowing him personally, knowing the family he comes from, I know that they did extensive research on him. I know he's going to be a great fit. He's a third generation professional athlete, and he's going to come in and be a seamless fit and fit right into that culture. So, great pick for them, I believe.
So, go ahead, Bradley.
I was going to say, I think to me this is another example of sometimes we don't got to outthink the room in the process, right? I mean, Derek Stingley, to Damien's point, his 2019 season was outstanding. And then he went in really for the past 2 years with that pedigree. And then I think he's been a victim of just being over-scouted, right? Where we try to poke for holes. We try to knock a kid down who's been crowned. But at the end of the day, what changed, right? I mean, you see him at the pro day, you see what kind of athlete he is, and then you start kind of answering some of those questions. Hey, well, he was injured this past year, so maybe that's why he didn't look as sharp as he was in 2019. But you always go back to when he was at his best.
Yep.
And when he was at his best, he might be the best player in the class.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it is, right? And so if I'm GM Nick Caserio, this pick makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and you think about Nick Caserio, and I'm glad that you brought him up, and that Patriots background, coverage over pass rush. The comp that we have for him on the Draft Network's 2022 NFL Draft Guide is Stephon Gilmore, right? Who spent a lot of time being very, very successful for the New England Patriots. So that Nick Caserio kind of Patriots way DNA of constructing a roster, you see them consistently that like to manufacture some pressure opportunities, but you can only do that reliably when you got dudes on the outside.
Right.
And there is no question that he is physically the most talented corner in this year's class. I personally had Sauce Gardner ranked over him, and Dre, you and I talked about it earlier this month when we were all together kind of previewing the class. Those concerns were more about durability and availability.
Yeah.
And as far as length, for Sauce is more of a scheme-specific type starter. But if you want man-to-man coverage, go watch the practice reps against Jamar Chase. I mean, you were there.
Come on, DBU. Let's go, Keith. Go off.
Yeah, I seen it in person, and I seen it every single day. And when I joined Draft Network, right, and y'all guys had me, that was the first thing I brought up. It's like, not only was it Jamar Chase, it was Justin Jefferson and Terrace Marshall. That's three different styled wide receivers, right? Their releases are all different as far as Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. You're talking about two back-to-back top wide receivers, and this guy at 17, 18 years old stepped on the field with those guys and battled with them practice out of practice. I will never forget those reps with him and Jamar Chase going at it.
I mean, the level of competition as well, there's no questions about how this guy's going to match up against top receivers. He did it in the SEC West. The entire season going through the national championship, the college football playoffs, he guarded the best players in college football and shown that he can lock them down. And so for a team that needs culture changers, franchise pillars, they get one here in Derek Stingley, who I had a CB1.
Let's talk about the New York Jets, who are on the clock with the number 4 overall pick. We had mentioned the draft might have started at 3, but sure enough, they stayed chalk relative to what has been very popular, just like with the Trayvon Walker momentum that was built. The momentum here could be a pass rusher. We know they want somebody opposite Carl Lawson. It could be a corner. You look at that room, it's desperate that they need help there. But offensive tackle, the draft selection of Mekhi Becton as a top 15 selection from just 2 years ago has not aged particularly well. I know there was some controversy around his lack of attendance at OTAs. I understand he was expecting a child, so he had a legit reason to not be there, but it's almost felt like this Jets organization has kind of had him at arm's length since he showed up at training camp, where they felt he was out of shape last year.
I think the Jets can't go wrong right here. Whether it's tackle Ikem Ekwonu, whether it's a corner in Sauce Gardner, whether it's an edge in Kayvon Thibodeau, but what about a receiver? I mean, because you think about the teams in the top 10 who need receivers, the Jets may not be willing to wait to 10 to get their guy. And if it's either Jameson Williams from Alabama, Garrett Wilson from Ohio State, I wouldn't be shocked, nor would I judge it if they go receiver at 4.
Let me counter you with this. They also have pick 10, right?
Yeah.
They have 35 and 38. Would you rather guarantee you get a high-caliber trench player here and then maybe get up in front? Because I'm not necessarily worried about the Giants or the Panthers taking a receiver. I'm worried about Atlanta and probably not Seattle, but that might be a trade spot where you might have to play defense and be like, all right, let's do a pick swap and we'll give you a 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
I go offensive tackle, man. I think about Zach Wilson, and we forget that he was at BYU, right? And that season that he took off, I think BYU had probably like 6 or 7 group of 5 teams, and he was standing in a good pocket and he was comfortable, right? And then he goes to the Jets team and it's not the same offensive line, and you just invested too much into the quarterback position, going back to Sam Darnold, to miss again, right? You can't miss again, so you have to give this guy every opportunity to be successful. So I go offensive tackle, whether it's Ikem Ekwonu or Evan Neal, to protect my investment.
I think it's going to be offensive tackle as well. This is a deep edge class. I think they'll address edge later in the draft. I think it's tackle.
I agree with you, GM Dre.
All right, gentlemen, the pick is in.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to slide right over here. Ooh. Because the Jets have taken Sauce Gardner, cornerback, Cincinnati, with the number 4 overall selection. So now the games have begun, gentlemen.
That surprises
Sauce
me.
Gardner.
Everybody's mock is a mess.
Jets fans are also in shame. They've been hammering. They're not. The Robert Saleh defense. They'll get the corners later.
I have the receipts for months.
We've heard it for months. The Jets would never take a corner this high. It's not realistic for this defensive system. Well, here we are. Never say never, especially in the 2022 NFL draft.
Let me just say real quick, I am happy I took the over 4.5 corners in the first round. I'm feeling pretty good right now, but this is a.
It's a shock.
This is a shocking pick.
Super shocking.
It's a fit when you think about his skill set, right?
It's a fit, but this is
not the right pick. I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let Dre finish.
This is not the right pick. You have so many holes at so many more other premium positions. You talk about edge rusher. Your defense was a very bad defense last year. When you talk about offensive tackles, interior offensive, you can even go interior offensive line. And I'd say, you know what, you're helping Zach Wilson. But to go cornerback, we've talked about this defensive scheme and how they don't necessarily need to value corners because of the scheme. And then you go Sauce Gardner.
Let me interject and tell you why I'm not surprised. You first, though. Go ahead. You had something.
Just to add to Keith's point, I mean, they've had success when Saleh was in other places. They've had success with late-round guys that can fit their 3 scheme, guys who are longer and taller and have ball skills. You don't have to necessarily draft one that early. I mean, so they found those guys late.
Let me tell you why I'm not surprised. This team last year drafted Zach Wilson with top 2 pick, right? Yep. Then they traded up. And they went out and they got Elijah Vera Tucker. They went very heavy on the offensive side of the
Elijah
ball
Moore, Michael
in the
Carter.
draft. Correct. With almost all of their early
first
round
four.
first 4 selections were offensive side of the ball. The defense gave up one of the worst points allowed seasons in the history of the New York Jets last year. Robert Saleh is sitting here saying, I need some guys on my side of the ball. We invested a bunch of young players. Joe, this feeds into the talking point that you like to talk about a lot, which is surrounding a developing quarterback with developing players. So that's the concern, because I agree with everything you guys are saying. You need more stability on the offensive line. Now, you did pay Laken Tomlinson a king's ransom to come play offensive guard for you and play that spot opposite of Elijah Vera-Tucker. But, and they obviously need wide receiver help, but you don't know what a lot of those players are, but they almost have to be committed to, we're invested in the youth on the offensive side of the ball. We got to let them grow before we can continue and undercut ourselves from developing players.
Well, and they have pick 10. They have pick two in the
35
top.
and 38.
35 and 38. Right. So they're going to have more opportunities to help Zach Wilson. But I'm a little bit more on Keith's side here, where I felt this needed to be a pick to help Zach Wilson, not necessarily from a receiver perspective, but an offensive tackle like Ikem Ekwonu, who could come in and from day one be a major asset in the run game and obviously in pass protection. And I do think it has to go back to helping Zach Wilson. And while I think Sauce is a great fit, I think he's going to be a great player for them, I think I'm always going to wonder about the missed opportunity here. And then the heat goes back to Mekhi Becton to come in and fulfill his promise as a high pick. Right. Joe Douglas drafted this guy. And so if he comes in and plays to his potential, we can forget about this. But right now, I think it's fair to have some questions about that.
I just feel as if it should have been edge. And the reason why they've been trying to replace John Abraham feels like a decade right now. Like Carl Lawson was a good signing, but he got hurt, which has kind of been the story of his career a little bit, being banged up with injuries. So I just feel as if you draft to first of all, get in position to win your division. You're dealing with Josh Allen, that man in Buffalo. I would rather get after him than trying to cover Stephon Diggs with Sauce Gardner.
So let's shift gears to the New York Jets, because I do want to, or the New York Giants, because I do want to give them some time while they're on the clock here. Okay, and we'll obviously get a chance to talk about the Jets again when they come back on at 10. The Giants were 4-13 last year. They have Andrew Thomas, who had an improved level of play this past year, but the offensive line is still a major concern for this team. They got to figure out what their long-term commitment is or is not to Saquon Barkley, but he's not a running back who's going to succeed when there's not good and obvious lanes in front of him. And then they've been a team that's also been considered for corners, potentially pass rush. Azeez Ojulari was a successful rookie rusher for them last year. What do we think about this New York Giants team based on the way these first 4 picks have developed?
I think Joe Shane is extremely happy
with
Joe Douglas right now. He has the opportunity to really choose from Ikem Ekwonu, Evan Neal, or KT. You cannot go wrong with either of those picks here at 5, because then you can come back at 7 and get the other guy.
So this is the thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but just to highlight your point, you name those 3 guys, they have opportunity to get 2 of them now. 2 of them, right? Yeah. They can leave this with Ikem
they
and
get their
Kayvon.
choice of tackle and KT, because Carolina's sitting behind you and is the sandwich pick.
Carolina's happy too.
Right, because they're guaranteed they're getting one.
Right, they're going to have a chance at Neal or Ekwonu.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They'll have their choice. I mean, they're in a great spot.
Yeah, this fell
here.
right into their lap. Be able to get one of those 3 guys and change the trenches on both sides of the ball.
Need it.
Joe, I want to ask you, obviously you're close following with the Buffalo Bills, Joe Shane, now the general manager of the New York Giants. What is your expectation based on Evan Neal, Ikem Ekwonu, Kayvon Thibodeau? These are the names we're throwing around right now. What's your expectation based on trends, assuming he carries some of what he was indoctrinated with when he was in Buffalo?
Trenches. So I think we're going to see a combination of offensive tackle and edge. And they love length. I can promise you that. And the good thing about all these options is they're long, right? I mean, even if you go to the edge rushers and introduce Jermaine Johnson into this conversation to go with KT and then Neal and Ekwonu, they're going to get prototypes at offensive tackle and edge, 2 premium positions under that Brandon Beane influence that we assume is going to be carried into this Giants organization. And so Joe Shane's got to be a real happy man, because he's not going to have to deviate at all from his core principles that I believe he's looking for and the players he wants to draft. And this is foundational stuff. This is year 1 for this regime. And they have these 2 picks, and they're not going to have to blink at all about having to deviate at all. So this is setting up perfectly for them.
The pick is in.
Okay.
Let's go around the table. Choose your fighter. Go ahead.
I'll go first. I'm going to go with Ikem Ekwonu out of North Carolina State.
I'm going same.
Ekwonu.
Oh, clean sweep, and you all are unfortunately incorrect.
Wow.
You're not even on the right side of the football. The Giants are taking Kayvon Thibodeau with
the
the number 5 overall pick. Brentley, this moment is yours, my friend. This is our 2nd-rated edge defender in this year's draft class. an Oregon Duck, which I know is very near and dear to your heart. Good hands here. 6'0", 254, 33 1/8 on the arm, 9 3/4 on the hand. Verified 4.58 in the 40-yard dash. Brentley, go ahead.
I had this in my mock draft. I don't know why I just said Ikem Ekwonu right there when I thought this made a lot of sense. But no, I mean, I personally thought KT was the best pass rusher in this draft. And yeah, admittedly, I'm biased. I went to Oregon, but because of that, I was able to watch every single game this man's played. And I think he has the best first step. I think he can bend. He has length. He has power. He's underrated in the run game. And then to me, one of the things that people like to kind of criticize him about is his football character. I would have challenged and say, hey, you know what? I think that could be a strength, really, because when you think about the fact that he got injured twice, could have opted out, came back, football's important to this guy. And when Joe mentioned, this is a tone-setting pick. This is a foundational pick. This makes a lot of sense. And really why I think a lot of us criticize the Jets, I'm a pass rush over coverage guy. And
let's go, Bradley.
In a division that has Dak Prescott, who throws the ball 50 times a game, right?
With a sorry-looking offensive line
line. What's the quickest way to really change the tides? It's getting after the quarterback, and I think KT, at any of these edge rushers, will get after the quarterback the most and the quickest in this class.
Well, we talked about the last time the Giants were relevant as an organization as far as legit contending for championships, and we talked about the pedigree of pass rushers that they had. And we know that this Oregon defense kind of exposed KT to some different alignments, responsibilities. We kind of saw him maybe playing out of position a little bit before. This year was a little bit more of a true outside role for him. And, that's one thing I do like about this for the Giants is like, historically, you've had a certain DNA around who you are as an organization, and this can bring you a step back to being closer to that as compared to what you have generally been, which is lost. You think about their last 3 head coaching hires were 2 years and done, and that was it.
Yep. No, I agree, and I'm gonna say this. Even speaking to Kayvon and his motor, and to talk about work ethic issues, I think New York is a good spot for him because it is the big lights, right? And if he's motivated by other situations off the field, he's not going to want to turn on SportsCenter and see that Kayvon Thibodeau got pancaked 10 times. You know what I'm saying? So this could turn out good in the sense of the fact of he invites the big lights and he's going to raise his level of play to match that. So I think it's a really good pick. And then Kyle, you talked about just the blast from the past, and you mentioning Justin Tuck and Michael Strahan, Osi Umenyora, Jason Pierre-Paul. Like, you can name those list of guys that really they drove the motor for this team when they won those Super Bowls. We
haven't even talked about 2 things here. Wink Martindale's the defensive coordinator with the New York Giants. Like, how about a fun toy for Wink? And then, Azeez Ojulari, one of their picks from last year, a second-round pick, wound up being a really nice player. And so the pass rush is looking pretty nice right now in New York.
Those rush linebackers who are kind of 2-point stance releases outside.
Great fit.
They got a lot of heavy hitters inside.
Odafe Owe last year. Look at the success he was able to have under Wink Martindale. Why can't KT replicate that?
Talking point was, no sacks his last year. Penn State goes, and he has one of the highest pressure totals of rookies from last year's draft class.
Absolutely.
But again, that's manufactured pressures, right? So what is fun is you can get into the debate of coverage versus pass rush. But when you have the best of both worlds and you can manufacture rushes with explosive athletes like KT, that's when guys cook. And I can't think of a better fit for KT than that Wink Martindale defense, because we've seen what he's done with the likes of Matt Judon and Za'Darius Smith. And, like, the list goes on and on.
KT's got more
juice. That's exactly my point. He's a more physically talented player than these super effective players that Baltimore has been running out here for a really long time.
But again, I'm going to come back to the theme. We shouldn't, not saying we do, but as draft analysts, as a community, we got to stop over-scouting players.
Yes.
Derek Stingley, KT, were viewed as top-tier guys coming into the season, and now look at them, both top 5 picks. I think these guys who dominate early on, there's a reason why they're dominating.
Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase from last year, right?
Same exact thing.
Same exact. And granted, there were different circumstances with them choosing to opt out for their respective seasons, but at the same time, Keith.
No, I was just about to give Joe a shout out with to bet on traits, right? Like
Bet on
we've
traits.
seen the NFL do that. Like they said, Kayvon Thibodeau, Derek Stingley, we want to bet on really good football players and bet on traits.
So how happy are the Carolina Panthers right now?
Their pick of tackles?
They get
Are you
their
kidding?
pick of tackles. And this was fun because we had this conversation about, scarcity, right? It hasn't come yet. We're still looking at all these tackles on the board.
I think that there's an interesting conversation going on within their draft room, though, because this is a team that needs a quarterback, right? They need a quarterback. They certainly have put out the notion that they're happy with Sam Darnold, but I think they still draft a quarterback in this draft at some place, and it's a deep tackle draft, so they may be able to address the tackle position later in the draft.
Now, if they trade for your quarterback, Baker Mayfield, does that count as drafting a quarterback?
Well, he's also someone that is coveted by Seattle as well. I mean, so there's no guarantee. And again, they just gave up significant draft capital to trade for Sam Darnold. I mean, so I don't necessarily see that.
Here's a quick thought.
Yeah.
I think we all assume Carolina wants one of these tackles, and they very well might draft one.
It could be Kenny Pickett.
What if they trade out right now? Because I think there's a lot of teams behind Carolina that in no way they went to bed last night thinking, holy crap, Ikem Ekwonu, Evan Neal are still available at 6.
Good point.
I think this could prompt a trade up. And I think Carolina would gladly trade out. And so
Because all the tackles are still
exactly.
there.
That's what I mean. I don't think this scenario, most GMs went to bed thinking this is possible.
And don't they only have one pick in the top 100?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, they emptied the chamber on C.J. Henderson,
Sam Darnold.
Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore,
yeah,
who left
Gilmore,
in free
yeah.
agency. So it's been a tough 12 months for Carolina, right? As
To
far
say
as,
the least.
12
they can-
months, yeah. You're a little further back.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's come on. We're trying to be objective. Listen, let's not hijack this and turn this into an episode of Draft News where all we do is just
We've been
can
talking
on
about the Carolina Panthers. They take over everything.
everything. So Carolina, this
Except
is your
for the
time
win
to
column.
shine. Right.
If I'm Carolina,
I can say that. I'm the Charlotte guy. My wife's a Panthers
You got to live in the
fan.
community, man.
Yeah,
Come on.
they know. They know what's up. They're more frustrated than
Joe's
I
going
am.
to get
so-
off the plane and there's going to be eggs all over the
No,
front of his house.
trust me, they're legitimately mad because it's their team. They're mad, so they know what's up. They
This
know
is
that
a
there's been a
very-
lot of miscalculations.
It's just a very intriguing pick altogether because while we're talking tackles and trading out, they could very well take Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis right here to fill that quarterback need. But I'm just of the belief, Joe, you kind of swayed me when I saw you on Twitter talking about it. Take a tackle here, call up San Fran, see what they want for Jimmy, call up Cleveland, see what they want for Baker. You got to fix the
they
offensive
got
line.
the cap space, right? They're the most cap space in the league right now. They
Yes.
can acquire one of those quarterbacks.
if I'm Carolina, I'm calling New Orleans and saying, hey, you want one of these tackles? I'll go to 15 and do that.
Well, I guess the hard sell with that, and the pick is
Division.
in, there is no trade.
Wow.
Okay.
The hard thing with that is all the tackles are still here. So New Orleans is probably going to say,
We're good.
We'll trade to somebody else.
we'll trade somebody
I'll
else.
talk
and
to
pay
New
less,
York.
right? So,
And
like,
the interdivision trades,
Yeah.
really strange.
So-
Yeah, they rarely happen.
the selection is the top-rated offensive prospect
Let's go.
for the Draft Network scouting staff's offensive side of the ball on the draft board. Ikem Ekwonu, offensive tackle, NC State. They're staying in the Carolinas. He is the choice for the Panthers. So, Joe, you seem pretty excited about this pick.
like
We
it.
obviously had
Yeah.
him here at the
I'm
Draft
so
House
ha- I-
yesterday.
I'm
Go
so
ahead.
happy.
Go ahead.
For so many reasons, right? Like, first of all, this is going to be the last time I'm ever going to say this. Are you guys ready for this? You guys ready?
I'm going to miss this.
Enjoy it.
The Carolina Panthers have had a different primary starting left tackle in every season since Jordan Gross retired back in 2012. I got a feeling they finally got their guy in Ekwonu. And not only did they get their guy that I think is going to be a pillar of this organization for a very, very long time, but this is a great dude, right? We got a chance to spend time with him yesterday, and you have no doubts about this guy stepping into your building and being a culture changer. And he's a Charlotte guy. He grew up in Charlotte. He grew up right there, and his family is living there right now. And so for Icky, he's got to be elated. I know we're all happy for him.
Yes.
Massive need for the Carolina Panthers. Only question left is a quarterback. But let's be honest, the rest of this team looks pretty decent in an NFC that is absolutely wide open. So go get Baker, go get Jimmy G, and see if we can stop talking the way that we've been talking about the Carolina Panthers, because I legitimately think they're now a quarterback away from being a competitive football team.
And the nice thing about those quarterbacks is you don't have, obviously the ceiling's the question, but you don't have to give up a a bunch of your pillars on the defensive side of the ball, like
Right.
was in conversation with some of the other moves that they were considering making.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears. Giants back on the clock, and they've allowed Carolina to make the choice of their tackle. So it makes you wonder, okay, were there multiple that they had graded similarly? Did they know who Carolina was going to covet, and they felt confident that this guy would come back around? So now that Ekem is off the board, and I believe that was everybody's choice when they were on the board at 5, how do we assess the rest of these offensive tackles, and is there any other position that could sneak in here at number 7 overall and steal this spot?
I think that they could have went corner, but I don't know that they have, or we have a corner that is rated that high. So I think that the pick should be, a tackle, and there's a big one that's left that's still on the board. It could be the pick.
And that flexibility that he's going to bring, because if you're comfortable with Andrew Thomas's growth at left tackle, you can put Evan Neal at right.
Yeah.
And you can then Daniel Jones can take a breath, right? He's sitting back there, he's like, okay, I have an offensive line that's competent, not just competent, I can trust these guys to protect me. Then that also gives the front office that last final look at him to say, okay, I think they came out and said they haven't done a great job, surrounding him.
They haven't.
And they haven't.
Yeah.
So they make this pick, okay, now let's see what you can do this season. And now if you're still the same turnover-prone Daniel Jones, now we know that we go ahead and pivot and go a different direction.
Well, and they have not exercised that 5th-year option.
Nope.
And the news came out today that Dexter Lawrence was getting his. So
That kind of tells you a lot.
Yeah, it's go time for Dan. It's also go time for Saquon Barkley too.
Yes.
And I love the fact that we've talked about positional flexibility being important with Andrew Thomas at that left tackle spot, because realistically, I think that's really the only one that you can hang your hat on this offensive line right now. So Evans played right guard. He's played right tackle.
Yep.
He's played left tackle. Like, he's played on both sides of the line and inside and outside. So you got to love the flexibility that does afford you. And of course, we had the conversation with talking with Jacksonville at number 1. If you're drafting a guy high, your expectation is the guy's going to be playing outside. Well, Evan, at the very least, now you can put him there, and let's let Saquon Barkley run downhill off tackle, right? Let's go ahead and get some forward push and let him get into the line of scrimmage and into the second level with some momentum.
I'd personally go Evan Neal. I mean, I had Evan Neal as my number 1 offensive tackle in this draft. But just to play devil's advocate, because as you mentioned, could there be another way they go? And, I heard obviously it's been talked about some rumors about them liking Garrett Wilson, the receiver out of Ohio State.
Yep.
Looking at our team needs and some of the players who are going to be expiring contracts, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, their first-round pick last year, is already in trade talks.
Get on the block.
If they want the opportunity to really see what they have in Daniel Jones, maybe, and again, I wouldn't do this, but maybe they decide, hey, let's get him another receiver. Let's try to maximize the talent around him in terms of his pass catchers to get a fair assessment.
What's interesting is I believe it was Peter King said earlier this week, if you want one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers, you better get in the top 13. So, I mean, you start looking at the picks that are off the board right now, and if that is indeed intel that we see manifest itself, we're starting to get into a math situation here where we might see wide receivers. And obviously you look at Atlanta right behind you, and you look at the New York Jets at number 10. You look at Washington at number 11, Houston at 13.
Yeah.
There's opportunities here to go ahead and get some of these wide receivers running, so the Giants have the opportunity to maybe start that run.
And maybe a team wants to trade up to get into that mix, right? And that's
cut
the
that
other
off.
thing. That's the thing. You mentioned all those teams: Atlanta, the Jets, Washington, Houston. If I'm the Eagles at 15, and I know it's an interdivision trade, I'm calling the Giants.
Didn't they have an interdivision trade
They just did it last year with Dallas to
Exactly.
go up and manufacture.
So Howie
the
Roseman's a
picks.
deal maker. He doesn't care who he's calling, and so that's another option here, because I think the Giants, again, as Joe mentioned, they're starting over, right? And so I think acquiring more picks to me is in their best interest. So if they don't go Evan Neal, I would look to trade back.
The pick is in.
Okay.
All right.
They got the memo.
Okay.
Evan Neal is the selection
All right.
for the New York
Joe.
Giants. They have to feel great about how they played the board here, getting a prime pass rusher and a prime offensive tackle. Joe, you kind of called your shot here. You said, I know Joe Shane, expect trenches, and that's exactly what we got.
Yeah, and they needed to. They took care of their edge and defensive line situation with KT, and now coming back and getting an offensive lineman that can fill a variety of spots like Brentley has pointed out. And, this is an offensive line that's probably going to have 3 or 4 new starters from the unit that we saw last year. And I think that's a good thing, right? And they have a real nice opportunity to improve their talent and give Daniel Jones a chance and give Saquon Barkley a chance. And so the clock's not ticking on Brian Dable and Joe Shane, but it's ticking on those two guys. And if they're going to have meaningful careers in New York, it's going to happen this year, and they've now started to have the pieces around them to really have a chance to do so, and a great offensive mind in Brian Dable to lead it.
Yeah, and I think it puts the highlight and puts the spotlight squarely on the shoulders of Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, right? Because you've done all these things, and I think they'll continue to address support for them to find out what they have in them. So, the spotlight's on those guys.
Let me cut you off. I'm sorry, Dre. I just want to give a shout out to the Giants, right? Because how many times have we seen teams, they shy away from doing the right thing because they get caught up in the draft height and the fluff and, wanting to be that team to make the splash pick. They stuck to their guns, right? They stuck to their principles as team, and they took two players that may not be sexy, right? It's not necessarily the sexiest picks, but guess what? Those picks are going to pay off 2-3 years from now, if not next year. So, man, just shout out to them for doing the right thing as far as the organization.
What I really like with this, too, is New York has had a quiet offseason to this point.
They haven't had any money.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the roster, and it's like, oh, okay, we've had some attrition. We've had some guys leave. We haven't really had an opportunity to be competitive in free agency and replace these guys. But you feel like they went out and they got a plug-and-play blue-chip starter on each side of the ball here with these 2 picks. So, I mean, that Justin Fields trade last year to net them this position, one last parting gift from Dave Gettleman, although this one probably is going to age a little bit better than some of the other big decisions he made for this organization.
I just feel like they're sticking to their board. I think they're sticking to their board, and that's really what you got to do. You can't overthink it. You can't chase need. I think they're truly going, KT, he's probably our best player available. Boom. Evan Neal, I'm shocked he's here at 7. Boom. Let's keep it going. I would credit to them.
So the Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock with a number 8 selection. We just got done alluding to wide receivers, and it's usually your choice of wide receiver in the mock draft, right? As you look at this team, and we understand Calvin Ridley's been suspended for the year, and even before that, he was a part of some rumors regarding a potential trade and wanting to get a fresh start in the organization, maybe being on board with that. But I look at this depth chart. I look at this 2 deep as things currently stand, and the Falcons are one of the teams that I think has the biggest challenge for this upcoming year ahead of them because they don't have a lot of talent. Right? I mean, they made the decision to trade Matt Ryan, and they don't have a lot to show for that, and they obviously passed on drafting a quarterback last year with the number 4 overall pick in favor of Kyle Pitts. So I think this would be a team that probably benefits from going, like we just got done talking about with the Giants, a best player available situation, but you also look at the offense, and it's very apparent that they need help at receiver.
Sure, and again, I think that something which could be a dark horse for them is a trade back, right? Because this is a team.
Exactly what I would do.
This is a team that has a ton of holes, but it wouldn't surprise me if they drafted a quarterback for the future, albeit maybe not this early. Address the wide receiver room, but I could easily see them trading back, getting more picks, and filling more holes on that roster.
I agree with Dre 100%. I would trade back because he talked about the amount of holes, and then you talk about drafting a wide receiver, right? Every year we have these wide receivers, and if you go back, if they go to not so, I don't want to say beneficial situations as far as quarterbacks, then it's almost a waste. I know he's an Oregon Duck, but we gotta keep it honest, right? So I don't draft wide receiver here because if you get a Drake London or a Garrett Wilson, if he doesn't have a quarterback to get him the football, then I would hate to say it's a wasted pick, but it's a wasted pick. He's out there running routes. He's just doing one-on-one drills.
I think the argument I would say is if you think Mariota is a bridge, and unbiased, I mean, he's a bridge.
He's a bridge, yeah.
You might want an established receiver. You might want to take a Garrett Wilson here for C.J. Stroud next year. Just conversation, right?
Okay.
You might want that because you don't want to have a C.J. Stroud, just example, coming in next year with the same receiving core that we currently have. Because right now, I mean, it is bad. Like it is. This offensive depth chart is terrible.
And they've been trying to find an edge rusher for a long time now. They failed with Vic Beasley. They failed with Tack McKinley. They failed with the edge rush, right? So they've been trying to figure that part out too. They've also wanted to improve the interior D line, and they have so many different ways that they can go with
This is a basketball team.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You're right.
So what do we think the right pick is? Because, I mean, Jermaine Johnson's still here as an edge rusher, and that has been probably played at Georgia, right? So there is at least a little bit of a connection with him in the area there. And we've seen that with some of the picks that have come off the board already with Icky and Aidan Hutchinson. So what do we think the right pick is, although the pick is in? So I'll let you guys just kind of weigh in real quickly on if it's not a wide receiver, what do you think the right decision is?
Edge rusher.
Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah, they got to help the
Johnson.
trenches if it's not a receiver.
Jermaine Johnson for sure.
With the 8th overall selection in the 2022 NFL Draft, I'm going to stay over on the offensive side of the board here.
All right.
The Atlanta Falcons have drafted Drake London,
All right.
wide receiver
Drake won
USC. His consensus grade for us at TDN was an 85 on the dot. So he is somebody that we had a first-round consensus valuation on. There's some of us who are higher than others. 6'0", 219 pounds, 33-inch arms, obviously a massive wingspan. The production that he had in a half a season this past year was insane. 1,000 yards in 7 games he had. So, Joe, you've talked a little bit about them needing a volume receiver and likening the Arthur Smith offense. So go ahead and kind of tee this conversation off for us as I put this on the board.
Yeah, I think we all kind of knew that they were going to pick a wide receiver, and all day we spent yesterday talking about that, and it was now shifting to what receiver would it be? Would it be Garrett Wilson? Would it be Jameson Williams? Would it be Drake London? And I kept on going back to them wanting to get a big-bodied wide receiver. And, you know, it's not about replacing Calvin Ridley. It's about what does Arthur Smith want for his offense. We didn't really see Calvin Ridley in that offense. And you go back to the Tennessee stuff, and you think about A.J. Brown and that type of player, inside-outside versatility, good route runner, despite not necessarily having a frame that we typically associate with good route running and ball skills. And like Kyle had mentioned, the volume target. This team has, they're going to throw the ball 600 times this year. Who are they throwing the ball to outside of Kyle Pitts, right? And so now you have another meaningful weapon in this passing game that's going to give Marcus Mariota or whoever's going to wind up being their quarterback this year somewhat of a chance to have a guy that he can go to.
What I like about the pick is the ability to interchange both him and Pitts. Pitts can play outside. He can play in the slot. Drake can do the exact same thing. You can reduce them into tight, nasty splits. Heck, you can put them both together side by side, stack them. You can go to some bunch sets with maybe a Cordero Patterson, run some quick screens because, you know, both of those guys can block, especially Drake London. And that's another part to your point with Arthur Smith wanting to run the ball. Got a big body guy that can block on the outside. And when he comes in the slot against these smaller nickel corners, I really love the pick.
And then you also have the run after the catch ability for Drake, which is a surprising dynamic to his game. Go ahead, Dre.
Drake, I think I saw a stat that said Drake was like in the top 5 for all of the Power 5 schools for being able to make the initial defender miss.
Never got it down,
right. And so in his first, he played 8 games. I mean, I think that's an underrated aspect of his game, his ability to break tackles, his competitiveness and his toughness, because you want to think of him as sort of a basketball guy. But this is a guy who's big, he's tough, he has some rack potential, and he creates good separation at the top of the route as well.
Good ball skills too, right? And obviously with 33-inch arms, he's got a large wingspan, ability to go up and get the football and back shoulder throws and high point opportunities. So you could see what the vision is there. I think just the question is the value, right? It's positional value. But should we really be surprised that a team that drafted a tight end at number 4 last year was like, what's positional value here? We like this guy. We see the vision. We're going to take him.
Right.
Well, they have a lot of picks coming up too, right? This is a team that's loaded on day 2, and so we know they have a ton of needs. And look, they're not going to fix everything this year, but they have plenty more opportunities to round out this roster and address some of those other concerns.
I think they had to go receiver. I mean, again, looking at that depth chart, I don't even think I can name two receivers that they had before they got Drake London, to be honest with you. And I would just pose the question, I don't think Drake London was any of our wide receiver run.
No.
And to me, to see him be the first receiver off the board is a bit surprising, to say the least. I would have been Wilson or Jameson Williams.
Seattle liked what they saw, guys. Because the pick is in. And we talked about
Quarterback
scarcity at the offensive tackle position, prompting a run.
Wow.
And now the run has started because Seattle has drafted Charles Cross.
Wow.
That makes sense.
Offensive tackle from Mississippi State, air raid style offensive tackle. Damien, you think this makes sense? 6'4", 307 pounds, 34.5-inch arms. Go ahead, floor is yours.
They recently lost their left tackle, Dwayne Brown, who's a veteran, and he was there for a couple of years. They're in a complete rebuild, right? They brought in Drew Lock from the trade with Russell Wilson. This offensive, and that was one of Russell Wilson's biggest concerns, not just last year, but for quite a while, was just the inability to completely protect him. So I think it's a good pick. I think it's the right pick. Invest in the O-line. Like I said, you're rebuilding. Protect your quarterback. And this is a guy with ample reps, we know from the air raid, in pass protection. So he's comfortable in it. I think this is the right move.
So that's why I don't know if this is the right pick.
I think me and Kyle are going to go the same place.
They want to pound the rock.
Yeah.
I mean, look how deep their running back room is. You just traded Russell Wilson. You got Drew Lock and Geno Smith right there at quarterback right now. And you take the air raid offensive tackle. I mean, that it's surprising to me. I'm not gonna sit here and hammer the pick because I like Charles Cross.
That's a good point.
But that's just if you're gonna take a tackle, like I'm sure if Evan Neal was there, they'd have sprinted the card in too. But Trevor Penning, somebody who we also consider to be in this 8 to 20 range for offensive tackles, and he's much more proficient at traditionally what they've gone after, and he's a good athlete himself. So I guess I'm just a little surprised that Charles Cross, with his background, is the pick.
I think defensively, I think they're going to allow a lot of points, which will take the run game kind of out of the equation, right? Like, you have the Rams.
They lost Bobby Wagner too.
Bobby Wagner, the Rams have an unlimited amount of weapons. San Fran, is going to be able to put up points themselves. Arizona can put up points on them as well. So it's like, okay, once you're down 21-0, it's like, okay, well, we got to
have another way.
Yeah, we have to throw the ball.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, what came up for me, this is the second team in the top 10 that, that has a quarterback name. You talk about the Seahawks and you talk about the Panthers, right? And they decided to go tackle. And then I think when we talked about the Panthers, somebody mentioned the Seahawks as far as going and get a quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see down the stretch to see what these teams do at the quarterback situations, and do they end up drawing up the bid on each other to try to get that quarterback that they want, whether it's Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that could be an interesting dynamic post-draft for us.
And to Keith's point, I think the team at the bottom of the first round that's kind of licking their chops is Pittsburgh, right? They're like hoping it falls their way to get a quarterback.
I guess I would just quickly pose a question before we move on to the Jets. I'm surprised by the Charles Cross pick, but at the same time, I can't come up with another name that I thought would have made sense here. I think all the guys they would have wanted are probably gone. I mean, Jermaine Johnson would have been the only person I think could have made sense, but Ikem Ekwonu's gone, Evan Neal's gone, KT's gone. Consistently, those have been the three names around Seattle.
Well, and this is a regime that has traditionally loved to trade back, right? I mean, you see time and time again, they're consistently moving out. I think this is a testament to, the amount of teams that probably would like to move back in a perfect world. There's just not a market here yet, right? Because there's so many options. Teams are continuously saying, no, we'll trade up later and pay less. Yeah. And because I would agree with you. The top targets, Jermaine Johnson was probably the one that was like, I would have really gotten excited for. You don't probably love the value of Trevor Penning, so I get it. It's just the stylistic clash versus what they've traditionally been versus what Charles Cross has been.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So the Jets are back on the clock, and they forsook an offensive tackle with their first pick. They chose Sauce Gardner. Yep. Mm-hmm. So now that you've got Trevor Penning left at offensive tackle, that's been a spot that's been popular for them. You've got wide receiver at your disposal, and you still have Jermaine Johnson. And we heard some buzz that Jermaine Johnson might be the pick at 4 earlier this week.
Imagine 2 defensive picks for the Jets.
I think that could hahappen.
Right,
I think
do too.
Yeah.
It
shouldn't happen.
If you took Sauce Gardner, you better take Jermaine Johnson, right? Like,
you don't have to choose coverage or pass rush. You can choose both.
What about your quarterback?
Or
tackle. I think it could be receiver just because of the fact that Jameson Williams is there. The main thing with that is he is coming off the ACL. They have to have that discussion in the room. Are we going to just be comfortable allowing him to fully recover? I try to rush him back, but Jermaine Johnson has been linked to this team for about a month now. Mm-hmm. So he's available.
I think the thing about Williams that makes him less concerned is that he started his rehab process early on, and so he's only expected to miss maybe like the first 5 or 6 games, right? So he'll still have his first year, and with the advancements and so forth of technology, I don't really think it's as big of a concern about the injury, though.
And let's be honest, right? Like, the Jets are not a team that's looking at this 2022 season saying, yeah, we're going to challenge in the AFC East, right? Like, they're not. So if you're being honest about it, I think the appeal of Jameson Williams in that offense is he's the right receiver to balance what Zach Wilson wants to be as a big play guy, but also win underneath in a lot of the early progressions that this LaFleur system is going to afford. And we saw that system firsthand at the Senior Bowl. And you're sitting here wondering, man, a lot of these throws are coming out quick and at the top of the drop, and they're 5 yards of depth. Well, that's the concepts that they're calling, right? So Jameson Williams can win short. He can win vertically. He's the most explosive guy when he's healthy, for my money, vertically down the field.
Sure.
So I think he's kind of the best of both worlds for helping Zach walk that tightrope, which he really struggled with at times last year.
I think the elephant in the room here is the New York Jets have been active in the trade market for receivers. They were trying to get Tyreek Hill. They couldn't get it done. We've heard that they're after Deebo Samuel. I feel like this has to be a receiver. Like, if you draft your quarterback number 2 overall, you have 2 top 10 picks the very next year, and you're not going to draft offensive side of the ball. I say it out loud. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it
so
does.
if they go Jermaine Johnson, you better be on the phone with 49ers offering your whole draft next year to get Deebo. Because
and again, just to that point, I think for that very reason it could be a receiver, right? Because this is a deep edge class, and they can get a pass rusher on day 2.
I completely agree.
They'll probably be excited about a Evakady or a Mafe or somebody else.
Sam Williams.
Loftus if he falls out.
Sam Williams.
If they go round 3, Sam Williams might be there too. So
it's also a deep wide receiver class too. That's the part that we're missing. I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on the fact that I've been shook the past 5 picks, right? I can't believe they took Sauce Gardner at 4 because I thought just helping Zach Wilson by drafting the offensive line would have been the right thing. Like, you couldn't convince me that you're going to draft a receiver to help Zach Wilson, and then you didn't draft an offensive lineman to help Zach Wilson.
I think
that's a great point.
That's an extremely fair point. I think it all comes back to they chose a corner at 4. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, could having a better defense help Zach Wilson to not put as much pressure on him
Absolutely.
to have to score a ton of points?
Absolutely.
Take the pass rusher.
I'm just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt here a little bit here. I have my own questions here, but this AFC is loaded with quarterbacks and offensive skill players even more so than ever. Right. And if you want to stay in games and not put more stress on Zach Wilson to have to score, like, play some defense. And the Jets just gave up the most points in the history of their franchise last year. And I'm sure that Robert Sala's taking that on the chin. And so sounds like Kyle's got a pick for us, and we'll find out. But I would understand it.
Absolutely.
the selection is in, and with the 10th pick, the New York Jets are selecting a wide receiver. It's not the one we're pounding the table for, though. It is Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. 5'1", 116, 183 pounds, 32-inch arms, ran a 4.38 verified. That was, I think, the biggest surprise for me with his pre-draft process was just how explosive he ran. But they did go with a run-after-catch receiver for this offense that calls a lot of stuff underneath. So let's get some quick reactions, and then we're going to take a break here in just a minute. So let's get some quick reactions to this Garrett Wilson selection.
You have picks 4, you have picks 10. You're a bad football team. You do nothing to help your trenches. I don't know, guys. I don't know.
That's a fair comment. I will say for this pick in particular, for who was left on the board, I love it. Garrett Wilson was my wide receiver 1. I know that's not a popular opinion at this table, but for a guy in a quarterback, Zach Wilson, who needs, as Joe mentioned, a volume receiver, I think Garrett Wilson is a volume receiver. I think he's a guy who can win vertically. He's really good underneath. He's outstanding with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to make Zach Wilson, who, let's face it, he was a little inaccurate last year. Yep. You drafted Garrett Wilson, who's outstanding at body control and catching outside of his frame. So, if he throws an inaccurate ball, Garrett Wilson, we know, can at least adjust and make an attempt at it. I like this pick.
How about Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore?
I like it.
Both on the field at the same time as some Rack Kings, right?
Yeah, who's playing outside?
Right. Well,
who's Corey Davis?
Let's talk about
vertical.
Let's talk about that when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. Let's catch our breath, breath, and then we'll get back in after the first 10 picks are now in the books. there would be no greater certainty in life than we would take a commercial break, and the second the 11th overall pick has been blown to smithereens because the Washington Commanders have traded out. They get pick 16, 98, and 120 from the New Orleans Saints. So New Orleans is now on the clock with pick 11. They gave up a 3 and a 4 to get there. What do we think is, I mean, we had the discussion on the commercial break. We think this might be receiver. Some of us think this might be quarterback. There's an offensive tackle so everything's in play here that we perceive to be the primary needs for the New Orleans Saints.
You know, I think that if you narrow it down, I think it's either of those two. It's going to be tackle or it's going to be wide receiver. I mean, certainly they trade up because they've targeted a guy, right? And I do think they may be able to address the tackle later in the draft. So I'm going to say it's wide receiver. It's probably Jameson Williams, if you ask me.
I completely agree. I think they, in their wildest dreams, wouldn't have imagined Jameson Williams still being at 11. People had him going as high as 7 to the Giants, right? And so I think this is a home run for the Saints.
There's a lot invested in all of the moves that it took for them to get to this point. How can it not be for a quarterback?
Yeah.
I mean, they're a team that, from a salary cap perspective, it's widely known every year they're going to have to restructure contracts and manufacture space. I think that's the selling point for a quarterback, right? Is what better way to make sure you can continue to do that year over year over year and just kick the can down the road than to have a quarterback on a rookie deal where you don't have $15, $20, $25 million tied up in a quarterback, barring you getting an elite one in which you got to pay him 3 times that. So I think that's really the interesting thing for me is they gave up a 3 and a 4. It's not like they paid a massive amount. If it's for a quarterback, I like the value. But if it's for a wide receiver, with the wide receivers that we still perceive to be, I mean, you could see it on the board how much talent we still feel exists here at the wide receiver position. I might feel a little different personally, but we'll see.
Well, I guess I would push back and I would say if you're going to come from that angle, then we should really be judging the pick, them trading with Philly from the first place, right? I mean, I think if it's not a quarterback, then I agree with you. They shouldn't have made the trade with Philly initially. But that's in the past. They did. We're here. And so I have no problem at this point in time them moving up for Jameson Williams because he's that good of a player. And so to me, like, if it's not a quarterback, I'm not judging this trade up. I'm judging the first trade up.
Okay. Dre, right when we went to break, you said something to me. You laughed. You're like, man, I didn't get a chance to ask you this. What did you say? What did you say to me?
I was asking you if you still thought that Chris Olave was going to be picked ahead of Garrett Wilson.
And what was my response to you?
He was going to be picked next.
Chris Olave is the pick for the New Orleans
Moved up
Saints.
for him. Wow. They went and got their guy.
Wow.
Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State.
Wow.
The selection, the choice from the Saints with the trade up. 6003, 187 pounds, 439 verified 40-yard dash. You think about Jameis Winston, his skill set, vertical passer.
But see, the thing about that is you could have waited and got him and didn't give up as much draft capital. Sure? I think so, right? Especially with Jameson Williams, who's more of an explosive player, more of a downfield player. I would have picked him.
Which pick did they give up to move up?
They gave up 98 and 16. So they came. So what's interesting, right, is we heard that Washington really liked Chris Olave, and they chose to move out. But there was another team that we heard liked Chris Olave, and it was a team that was still in that teen strike zone. So maybe this was a matter of New Orleans understanding, hey, if we don't move for who we perceive to be our guy now, we won't get him. So let's go ahead and get him.
And I know everybody, they think like, man, if you're going to do all that moving, it better be for a quarterback, right? But we have to understand, and obviously I've lived in New Orleans, I've been, in New Orleans a lot. They're confident in Jameis Winston. Like the fan base as a whole, like they like what they've seen from Jameis Winston. So they're confident in him moving forward. And you think about their big losses. They lost an offensive tackle in Teron Armstead. And then the past couple of years, it's been Michael Thomas when we get into the playoffs, or bust, right? Because we don't have anybody else to get open. And let's be honest, the Saints have assembled one of the best rosters in football. They just can't get over the hump. And they wanted a complete team. So I don't necessarily like it being Chris Olave. I probably would have went Jameis Williams, but I like addressing the positional need because they made a statement. They're trying to win right now.
Let me throw another curveball at you guys. We have another trade. And we've been talking about interdivisional trades, and we actually have one. The Detroit Lions have moved up to number 12.
Let's go.
Holy
With
cow.
the
Let's
Minnesota
go.
Vikings. The terms of this deal yet to be announced to me here, but this is only for one situation, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
It's a quarterback.
Come on.
You gotta get a
Scared money
quarterback.
don't make no money. I put it in my
Here
mouth.
we go.
Let's go.
You gotta get a quarterback.
Here, this is the terms of the deal. Detroit sent 32, 34, and 66 for 12 and 46.
That's not
They
bad.
kept next year's first.
That's not bad at
kept-
all.
They kept they gave up 66 and did a
Wow.
pick swap.
Wow.
Yo, that's crazy. That's a great trade for
Yeah,
Detroit.
it is. Really is. Like,
Isn't Minnesota's GM supposed to be an analytics guy?
This is his first move.
What are we doing here?
This is the welcome to the party, right?
Wow.
This is the first move.
But let's say with the Vikings too, we've all done tons of mocks, right? And when you
They're
get
so hard to pick.
that's what
Right.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
get to the Vikings, what happens? You're like Jordan Davis,
Jermaine Johnson.
I had a trade here, but I had it being the Steelers with the Vikings.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett?
Come on, Malik.
I mean, we know that Dan
go,
Campbell
Joe.
at the Senior Bowl really enjoyed his time with Malik Willis. So they had a chance to work hands on. The pick is in.
Let's go.
Oh, Kyle
Let's
had a. Okay.
It's not for a quarterback.
You're kidding me.
Oh my goodness.
It is on the offensive side of the ball, and it is TDN's top pass catcher in this year's class. Jamison Williams
Wow.
is now off the board
I am shocked.
with the 12th pick with the Detroit Lions. So
I am disappointed.
here's the thing with Detroit, though. You got to love this addition to this team
Yeah.
when you consider what the needs are. They had Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a successful player last year, but you need more on the outside. I don't know if this is a vote of confidence for what they think they can get later in the draft, potentially at the quarterback position. But I do know this is a good football player that the Lions are getting at number 12.
Kyle, real quick, can I just ask before we dive into the analysis, what picks do they trade?
They traded 32, 34, and 66.
So the issue is the picks that they could have used for a guy like Ritter or Corral, they traded
They still got 46.
Still got 46.
They got 46
Okay.
back from Minnesota.
from Minnesota.
Unless they don't like those guys. I mean, Jamison
Yeah,
Williams
I mean,
is a stud. This is a really good football
yes.
player. I think he's the best receiver in the class.
Me too.
Vertical skill, yards after catch. He's going to help your spacing offensively. Now, do they have the right quarterback to get him the football? Yeah, that's up for debate. But if they don't have the right quarterback, they're setting themselves up really nicely offensively to usher in that replacement eventually.
You took my point, Joey, and y'all talk about this all the time, right? Draft a quarterback when you're ready, and they're taking the inside out approach. Before we get the quarterback, we're gonna make sure we have all the weapons, for this guy, whoever this rookie we bring in, or a guy they draft in the second round, so he can be successful. So it was crazy. I was not expecting this.
No,
especially
right.
Who predicted Jameson Williams would
Nobody.
be
Nobody.
with the Lions? But
But for the same
kinda
thought
get it.
process that we thought it made sense for the Jets, Detroit's not competing this year. So who
Yeah.
cares if he misses the first month of the season?
Right.
This is a dynamic football player who's going to bring a really different skill set versus the other receivers that you have in-house right now. They got a pretty solid core of talent on the offensive line. You got a talented back in DeAndre Swift that you're waiting for him to realize his potential.
And stay healthy.
This is going to be a good quarterback or a good situation for a quarterback. They just might not want to start the clock right now.
Right. So a few things. If I'm not mistaken, they play inside on turf, right?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be fast.
Man.
I will say this. Sorry.
No.
Jared Goff is not trash. I think a lot of people talk about Jared Goff like he's trash. And I've been on that wagon. Like Jared I think I read your mind then. I was going to say, because Jared Goff is not trash. And so I think when you add Aidan Hutchinson, blue chip, Jameson Williams, absolutely blue chip.
Yeah.
Like,
It's two really great moves, right?
Yeah.
So, like you said, Jared Goff's not a bad quarterback. He's serviceable.
you went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And led the league in passing
Yeah.
too. And his strength is throwing the ball.
It is deep ball. You don't need a big arm to throw the ball deep. Like,
Dre, what
Good
college
timing,
did you
good
go
touch
to?
and accuracy down the field.
University of California, bro.
They had a lot to do with his success,
Yeah.
getting to the Super Bowl and leading the league in passing. Let's keep that context. But I'm fine with him, keeping that. It's just I don't think he is a long-term option.
Gentlemen, we have another trade.
What is happening?
The Philadelphia Eagles have traded up to number 13 with the Houston Texans. So this is really interesting.
Nope.
We've seen the run on wide receivers begin. We perceive them to be a spot that could be a wide receiver hungry team. We also perceive this to be a team that has some pass rushers coming on expiring contracts.
Yeah.
And Jermaine Johnson is still on the board here at 13.
I think it has to be. Or Kyle Hamilton.
Or for Kyle Hamilton we talked about him all the way back at 1, right?
Yeah.
I think, there's a positional value debate to be had there, and that's a story for another day because we would never get back on track keeping up with the picks. I do have the terms of the deal. Philadelphia gives up 15, 124, 162, and 166 to move up 2 spots.
Wow. Modest.
Wow.
A 4 and a couple of midday 3 selections to move up 2 spots here.
I'm calling my shot. I think it's for Jermaine Johnson.
I
think they're looking. And I did a mock draft where I had him falling to the Eagles at 18. And I was telling Joe early this morning, I'm like, I watched Jermaine Johnson again last night. I don't feel good about that. This is a damn good football player. And I think Howie Roseman's sitting on this board, and he's probably shocked that he's still available.
I'm surprised that Houston didn't just stand pat and take him themselves at 13.
Yeah.
And they jump Baltimore, right? That's the team that they want to get ahead of.
Yes.
That's interesting as well because that's a spot we thought about for Jordan Davis.
Right.
And so that'd be a little off the wall, but you have to think, why are they jumping Baltimore? Who's the player they're fearing Baltimore is going to draft?
Well,
It could be Kyle Hamilton.
It could
Right.
be Kyle Hamilton because didn't you say that to me earlier today? You're like, Kyle, I cannot stop thinking about if Kyle Hamilton's on the board at 14, why would Baltimore not just take it?
Right.
All day it was in my head. So I think maybe it was in Howie Roseman's head too.
And if you want to get hung up on positional value debates and the cost to go up and get him was 3 day 3 picks,
Yes.
you're more than comfortable with that. But I do think you are seeing a discounted rate for a lot of these trades. It's not costing as much as it usually does to get top half of the first round trades in right now.
Good point.
And I think it's Jermaine Johnson because you look at, I think, Derek Barnett's contract is expiring, and they brought Hassan Reddick in. Now, if you have Fletcher Cox in that 1-year deal, but having Hassan Reddick on one end, envisioning having Jermaine Johnson on the opposite end, and we talked about with Dallas wanting to throw the ball 60 times a game, like you want to get at, and then you also want to get after your former quarterback Carson Wentz and get after Daniel Jones. Like this, I think that will probably be the direction that they will go with.
Well, what is interesting is, we mentioned some of the expiring contracts, but Fletcher Cox is back on a 1-year deal as well, and we had mentioned the name of Jordan Davis. So, there's any number of directions that this team can go right now.
Could it be Traylon Burks? I know we're not. People at this table aren't super high on him.
Sure.
I am, but stylistically, he does kind of fit in with what Devontae Smith does.
Sure.
Right, where Devontae Smith is that pristine route runner and outstanding hands, and that can be that kind of possession guy.
Explosive speed.
But Burks is that guy you want to get the ball in his hands and let him go to work after the catch. Even contested catch situations. Stylistically, I do like that fit. You think about other teams like the Packers and the Chiefs and the Cardinals who are probably very, very concerned about the wide receiver run. But then again, to Joe's point, the Ravens would probably do one on a receiver.
The pick is in, and with the 13th selection, the Philadelphia Eagles have traded up for Jordan Davis, defensive tackle, University of Georgia.
He wouldn't get past Baltimore.
Because he wouldn't get past Baltimore. 6'6", 341 pounds, 34-inch arms. Verified 4.78 40-yard dash. Obviously one of the most memorable NFL combines we've experienced in recent memory for just how explosive and athletic he is for a man of his stature. So the Eagles being proactive, jumping the Ravens to get this done. So let's talk about the challenges that Jordan Davis presents, right? Because he is such an explosive athlete, but it hasn't always shown up on the field.
I think that this is a player that I've always said, like, you can't necessarily look at the stat sheet with this player. You got to look at the impact and the influence, right? And what is great for him is that he'll have a year to be mentored by Fletcher Cox, right, who's been a dominant interior defensive lineman. So he's got 1 year, been to learn from him. But Jordan Davis will instantly improve their run defense, and I do think he can actually play on 3 downs now. So I think it's a good pick.
And even if they don't want to play 3 downs, they do have some quality depth on the defensive line to where if they did need to sub them out, they could. They have, I think, Javon Hargrave at the interior defensive tackle.
Another expiring contract for them,
Another
too,
expiring
next
contract.
year.
So it's like, I like the pick. Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard in Dallas. Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick in Washington, right? Saquon Barkley, and that's it in New York. So you know that you have some talented backfields to worry about. And if you take them out of the game, now you can go ahead and pin your ears back and go after these quarterbacks.
I think that the one aspect too that hasn't been said is that Jordan Davis is going to also help the edge rushers, because you're going to have to double team him and flesh on the inside, which will help their pass rushers on the outside get single coverage.
Gap control.
I understand the pick because I think Jordan Davis is a hell of a player. You know, guy that big is able to run a low 4.840, right? I mean, it's remarkable, and I think his tape speaks for itself. I just struggle passing on Jermaine Johnson and Kyle Hamilton in this situation. But, you know, again, I love the player. I just question the pick.
Philly's only got a couple of picks to sweat before they might get one of those guys
Yeah.
back on the board again.
Yeah.
So here's what I do think is interesting is Jonathan Gannon's the defensive coordinator there, right? And that base defense is a two-high safety shell. So you got Jordan Davis playing in the A-gap. What's the best way to not need that extra hat in the box?
Yeah.
With the line of scrimmage, right?
Great point. Yep.
So as I'm thinking about the Jordan Davis fit, you got Fletcher Cox and potentially Jordan Davis lining up as your 3-tech and your 1-tech and an even front defense with two high safeties. Now maybe they go out and they do end up getting Kyle Hamilton to play in a two high safety situation, and now you're putting both those players in positions to really complement each other with what they bring on each level of the defense. So I think that's probably something that was a contributing factor here is how Jonathan Gannon's defense is organized and structured to work. You need two guys back to prevent explosive plays, but then you open yourself up to losing in the run game. You can take care of that with Jordan Davis on the trenches.
Absolutely.
Very well said, Kyle.
So Baltimore Ravens now on the clock. So as we get ready to transition here, and this was a popular pick, Jordan Davis to the Baltimore Ravens.
Philly knew.
Yikes, yeah.
Philly knew.
Philly read the mock drafts, right?
Right.
So where does this team go from here? As you guys look at the board, and we're kind of perusing through value. Dre, it looks like you already found somebody.
Yes, the guy we've been talking about, Jermaine Johnson. Edge is a position of need for them. A lot of people picked Jermaine, to go as high as 9, but I definitely think that Jermaine could be the pick here.
I do as well.
You mentioned it earlier, and I can't get it out of my mind now. I guess you didn't say it around me, but you said it a couple seconds ago, and that was Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
And when was the last safety we seen on college film that had those type of instincts? It'd probably be Ed Reed, right? And I'm not throwing around Hall of Fame names, but I think this guy could be that type of special for this defense. And it's something that I think while other teams don't covet and think is very important, the Baltimore Ravens do. They understand that flexibility in the middle of the field. So I would like to see that. That would make me excited as an NFL fan.
It would be such a Baltimore Ravens. They do this
Every
year.
year.
They sit on the board
Every
and they're like
single year.
middle of the round, or they're late in the round, and it's like, all right, well, you guys do whatever you want to do, and this amazing player is going to fall in our lap every year, and
we'll
it feels
take
like they draft that guy every single time. Like I remember we did last year's show from Atlanta, and we're literally sitting there on day 3, and it's like, there's another day 2 talent that the Ravens drafted. Oh, there's another one. It's like it's clockwork with them. So I would hardly be surprised. But either one of the two names that we mentioned, Jermaine or Kyle Hamilton, would be great fits.
Now, they're in a really good position, right? Because some mocks, too, had them possibly drafting Trevor Penning. Always like, man, this is right to the edge where possibly those blue-chip players run out of guys that we've had ranked really high. But how the board shook out, I mean, they're in a position where they can go either way, and those are really good impact football players that can play 10 years in the NFL.
Absolutely.
I just feel like Hamilton was born to be a Raven, all right? And I know they signed Marcus Williams in free agency, but he's predominantly a free safety. And this you could allow Kyle Hamilton
To be your robber,
do
be
all
like
kinds of
Reed,
damage in
do
the
all type
box,
of
which
stuff,
is I think
yes.
where most of us like him anyways. And so
In that division where they're going to run the football a ton.
exactly,
Here's
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Here's a fun layer for the argument for Jermaine Johnson.
Sure.
Is Mike McDonald's now the defensive coordinator there. Where was he last year?
Michigan.
University of Michigan, working with Aidan Hutchinson.
Yeah.
And we heard Aidan Hutchinson
Perfect,
talk a lot about getting up from a 2-point stance and seeing down the line of scrimmage. I mean, athletically, they have similar athletic profiles as players and from a stature perspective. So, they were very aggressive last year. He's off the Baltimore Ravens coaching tree, so there's I think there's enough parallels between Jermaine's game and where he wins as a stout run defender, just like Aidan is, He might not have – he's got better length than Aidan has. I think there's enough parallels there that maybe if you wanted to go get another pass rusher, this defensive coaching staff is going to be able to put him in positions to succeed.
And it's also a need for what's going on in that division, right? You have Joe Burrow, who was just in the Super Bowl, and now you have Deshaun Watson. So you definitely need the pass rush. Odafe is going to continue to develop. But now you get a guy, Jermaine Johnson, on the other side, if that's the pick, then now you have two bookend, young, athletic, physical, violent rushers to terrorize these quarterbacks.
Just like the Smith brothers, they're.
Gentlemen, the pick is in, and it is one of these two names that we've been kicking around.
All right. Ravens do the Ravens,
suspense. Right? That's right. They let a good football player fall into their lap, but not just a good football player. In my mind, the best football player in this year's class. Kyle Hamilton is the pick.
I had a vision, man. I had a vision. I woke up with it.
Brentley, I'm going to reward your little vision quest. I'm going to give this card to you and let you put this one on the board.
Hopefully
here.
it's not too high.
It is.
Yeah, your boy, I'm going to pass on that one. Yeah, I am too short.
I wanted to let you could have put it down here. It wouldn't have been a problem. You didn't have to go up to the top shelf.
Look at you. You're 6'3". You have to go on your tippy toes.
I could have boosted you up.
Trying to set me up for failure.
No, I tried to let you have that moment. But shame on me for not checking the team boards.
I will say, for whatever reason, all day I just kept coming back. Kyle Hamilton, Baltimore Ravens. Because I had Kyle Hamilton going 15th to the Eagles.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would the Ravens pass on him if he's there? This is a Ravens type of move. They don't pass on the best player available, ever. Mm-hmm. And this is what happened. And I get it. There are people pushing back. Hey, they have Tony Jefferson. They have Marcus Williams, who they just signed in free agency. Maybe safety isn't the biggest need. Who cares? This is Kyle Hamilton we're talking about. He's my number one overall player. He's Kyle's number one overall player.
Mine.
Yours. Let's be real. This is an outstanding pick, outstanding value. This is classic Ravens.
How about pairing Marcus Williams with Kyle Hamilton?
Oh, my God.
Unreal.
What I think about is you think about how, especially with the crossers and the deep overs, and you can come out in a too high look, and then you got Kyle screaming down with that. His instincts and ability to trigger and be explosive downhill to blow up those plays, create turnovers, create PBUs. This is just – it's a great pick.
TDN's consensus number one overall prospect, Kyle Hamilton, falls to 14.
Ravens.
They do it every year.
Man, and to your point, man, is team building sticking to principles, man. They, like I said, they don't chase the news. They don't chase the hot topic. They watch the film. They grind the tape, right? And they just stick to their process at the end of the day. And they got our number one football player at 14, right? They're sitting there, and it's not necessarily a need for them either, right? And I think that's a key piece, too. Like, they probably could have very well walked into next season and been okay with their secondary, but it's like, you know what? This is a really good football player. Take him. And then, let everything figure itself out in the future. So I thought it was a really good pick. And this is probably one of my shocks of the draft, like, for him to go to the Ravens.
How about that division, though, right? The AFC North. Teams are going to want to run the football. The Steelers, the Bengals, the Browns. Now they have a guy that is going to change the math for their defense with this entire safety pairing of Marcus Williams, who's one of the best center fielders, free safeties in the game. And now you can just do anything you want with Kyle Hamilton. Just unleash him as a defensive chess piece. You can use him in kind of the Daxton Hill role, right, from that Michigan defense. So I just think the possibilities are endless there, and it's a really great move to not only just get a great football player, but with an awareness to what it's going to take to win in your division.
Okay, so Houston's back on the clock, but let's take a moment here and talk about safety positional value, please, because we're talking about market. The Baltimore Ravens have decided we want to completely reshape our defense with Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton to play two high safeties and what they're able to do. So you mentioned, change the math, right? You can be -1 in the box but +1 in the numbers with Kyle Hamilton, right? Because if you're going out and too high, you're automatically dictating a lot of run keys, right? As far as you're going to you're going to count the box and say, okay, traditional values tell us we're going to give the ball. But when it's Kyle Hamilton and even Marcus Williams, who's a good hitter too, and he's really explosive, that 1-2 punch in that division with all those teams that want to run the ball, Joe, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That changes the game for Baltimore as they look to get back on the horse here after a tough season this past year.
While the rest
Amazing
of the
job.
league zigs, they zag. And that, like you said, being able to get the best player available, not overthinking, not over-scouting, and just not outsmarting themselves. We see teams do this every year. It's like you're staring at a great player. You're like, you know what? We're going to go with need, and we're going to reach for someone. Like, no, Baltimore's like, you know what? Let's go too high. Let's be fluid. Let's be able to mix and match and be interchangeable with our coverages and everything else. Let's disguise some stuff for Joe Burrow. Whoever's playing quarterback at Pittsburgh, whether it's Mitchell Trubisky or Malik Willis, whoever's there, let's be able to cause some mental chaos for them that they see one thing pre-snap, and when the ball snaps, they see something totally different.
Picture changes, yeah.
All right, Houston. Now they're back on the clock. They moved back from 13 to 15. Okay, so the player that we were hoping to maybe see them choose at 13 is still here in Jermaine Johnson. So this might be a job well done by Nick Caserio to kind of read the field and kind of understand what was coming and still get a guy that he wanted and pick up some extra day 3 capital. Again, they picked up 124, 162, and 166. As you guys survey the rest of this landscape, is there any other names that you think might interest you for the Houston Texans? Go ahead, Brantley.
I mean, to me, it's Devin Lloyd. And I think Devin Lloyd is a really popular mock draft fit to the Patriots, right? Because you think about a Bill Belichick-style linebacker that kind of is the epitome of Devin Lloyd. Well, where did Nick Caserio come from? Where did he spend 25 years plus learning under? It was Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And, you know, I have Jermaine Johnson and Lloyd very similarly graded on my personal big board. And so if it's not Jermaine Johnson, who I think should be the pick, I could make an argument for Devin Lloyd, who, you know, for the Texans team that's really starting from scratch, getting the quarterback of their defense in Devin Lloyd, and also kind of doing what they did with Derek Stingley at 3, you're building a really good foundation for a defense that's been struggling ever since they've traded J.J. Watt and the rest of the team.
The pick is in. When you are building a team from scratch, what do we do?
Draft good players.
And where do you draft them?
In the
trenches, inside out. They are not only drafting inside, they are going, I don't think I saw a single pairing of this football team and this player
No way.
in mock drafts.
No.
They're staying in the state of Texas.
Kenyon
They are drafting Texas A&M offensive lineman Kenyon Green,
Keith is
our
swooning.
top-rated interior offensive lineman. After trading back from 13 to 15, adding some extra draft capital, they are drafting Kenyon Green, 6'0", 323 pounds, 34 and 1/8 inch arm. He's played tackle for them, but we project him inside as a guard at the next level. Consensus grade for him was an 86.42, comfortably a first-round grade. Our top interior offensive lineman. He's one of those guys that felt like we got bored with and just stopped talking about him, despite the fact that he was really, really good. So let's talk about this choice for Houston to build in the trenches. You can make the argument this is another New England Patriots-esque maneuver from Nick Caserio.
This helps Davis Mills.
Go ahead.
So this helps Davis Mills, and that's kind of been the theme most of the offseason. It was like, well, we're comfortable with him. He showed flashes and got better as the year went on, and some would say he was just either the best rookie quarterback or second best rookie quarterback. But this to me seems like a confidence builder for how they want to approach this season. Give Davis Mills more protection. I was thinking right tackle when you brought it up about the Titus Howard, I believe, the right tackle they drafted, and how that didn't kind of work out. But just in putting this pick in the trenches, again, just helps Davis Mills. They can help run the ball, protect him, again, keep the lap clean. It's kind of a surprise, but it's a good pick.
It was unexpected, but I love it. I love it from a philosophy standpoint and the player. Like what you talk about, they grinded the tape, right? You just watch the film. And like you say, this is a player that you'll get bored with, but he's very efficient at what he does. This guy that played left tackle, left guard, right tackle for the Texas A&M Aggies. Yep. You know what his best game was against? Will Anderson at left tackle.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So this is a very good football player. This is a high-level football player, and he's a plug-and-play guy, so you know you have a starting offensive lineman who has nastiness and tenacity behind him.
Reminding us some of Elgin Jenkins, who's been a very successful offensive lineman for Green Bay. But we do have a trade not involving the Washington Commanders at 15, however. It involves a former first-round wide receiver being dealt.
Oh, wow.
Hollywood Brown and a 3 traded to the Arizona Cardinals
Wow.
for the number 23 overall pick in this year's draft.
That is rich. What? A first-round pick?
They got 23 for Hollywood and a 3.
The Cardinals are all in.
I love the pick. I love the trade. You already have DeAndre Hopkins. You don't need a number 1 receiver. But this is somebody that Kyler Murray has chemistry with as well from their time at OU in college. You think about the speed that he's going to bring, paired with the speed you have with Rondale Moore. That's going to free up Zach Ertz in the middle of the field, Max Williams in the middle of the field. That's going to give James Conner light fronts already. Like, this is a move. And also you think about the fact that Kyler Murray wasn't really happy, not just from a money standpoint, but he's watching other young quarterbacks be built around properly. And Arizona's kind of been fumbling the bag a little bit. So I like the fact that they went out and got someone he's comfortable with and the dynamic ability he brings to that offense.
But the issues that I have with this pick is from a style standpoint, they've got a lot of race cars, right? They've got Andy Isabella, who hasn't played much. They have Moore, right, who's a smaller guy, and now you have Brown, right? And now you have Brown, right? I mean, so they've got a lot of race cars and need some bigger, more physical presences on the outside. And so from that standpoint, man, I'm not so sure about it, but certainly they're trying to build around Kyler for sure.
Let's come back to this because the Commanders have made their pick, and they have drafted a wide receiver, and we knew they were in the market for a wide receiver at number 11. They've drafted Penn State's Jahan Dotson here with this selection. So the wide receiver run is not only real, it's happening very quickly.
And
you took the over on that line of, what was it, 5.5 wide receivers in the first round?
A lot, yeah.
We're coming hot and heavy. So
and that's
Amy,
a receiver that Arizona wanted. That was a receiver that's been linked to them this entire draft process, and they weren't really shy about it either. So it's like, well, if they didn't trade for Hollywood Brown, it's like, well, the receiver that we wanted's off the board. Like, granted, they could have went what me and you talked about, like Boy Mafe or something like that. But, wow, like that is.
It's a bummer for me because I had that in my mind.
I'll say, good for the Commanders, right? Because I think the receiver they were probably targeting was probably Drake London. Stylistically, I think he fit pretty well with Terry McLaurin and what Carson Wentz likes to do with bigger kind of possession receivers. That's Michael Pittman and Alshon Jeffrey. He's gone. They decided to move back, pick up some extra picks, and still get a really, really talented pass catcher who they're different, but they also complement each other well, where Terry McLaurin is a route technician. He's really fast, but Jahan Dotson with the ball in his hands, being able to make defenders miss and things like that. I think this is a really good pick for the Commanders.
I love Jahan Dotson as a football player. He's got a bigger catch radius than you would expect for a player of his stature. His catch radius was tested often at Penn State down the field. He can win as a screen guy. He can win vertically down the field. He can stretch the seam. You can put him at the 3 strong in a trips alignment and have him run the deep over, and he's going to run away from leverage and really create a lot of conflict for those interior coverage defenders who are going to be charged with covering, whether it's a nickel corner or a safety. But he can play outside. You see the quickness, the foot quickness to get outside and beat press when he's lined up against press coverage. So he's a really, really good football player. And I think in a lot of draft classes that didn't have 5 receivers go in the first half of the first round, you probably would have talked about Jahan Dotson more.
No, I agree, and I was going to say this, that the consensus has kind of been that Jahan Dotson is a second tier, right? He's behind those other guys when we talk about Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. But when I watch him, I see the same exact thing on film. Like, you just outlaid everything, right? And that sounds like a really good football player, and I think that's exactly what Jahan Dotson is. So the Commanders being able to move back and then still get another explosive playmaker that I think Carson Wentz is going to need. I think at the Colts, they didn't have those true separators, right? And you're seeing that down the stretch that Carson Wentz, he struggled with his accuracy at times. So now they have guys that can just run away from people to kind of, I guess, make the coverage simple for Carson Wentz. Like these are guys that can dictate coverage easily because they pronounce the coverage. They show it to the quarterback simply, and then I think Carson Wentz will be able to get the football to those guys, and I think it's a good pickup for the Commanders.
So we now have the Chargers on the clock at 17. And Brentley already had one successful vision quest under his belt today. And I know you obviously have some experience with the Chargers organization in your professional career. So as you kind of survey the board, I would kind of love to hear your thoughts here on how this has played out for them and what you think some of their options are.
I think this is probably a dream situation for the Los Angeles Chargers with Trent McDuffie still on the board. You know, kind of based on what head coach Brandon Staley likes to do with his coverages and corners, he needs guys who can cover man-to-man. And they got one in J.C. Jackson in free agency, but Michael Davis, who the older Gene paid, he's not a man-to-man cover corner. He's a guy who can excel in cover 3 zone, which is what Gus Bradley played. They can get out of his contract next year. For my money, McDuffie's one of the best man-to-man corners in this class.
Yep.
And he can tackle. Tom Telesco loves Pac-12 players. High character guy. I'd be shocked if he wasn't the pick. Although I will say, I know they traded for Khalil Mack, but Jermaine Johnson would be interesting. So I'm going to say he's interesting. But I think it's McDuffie, but Jermaine Johnson would be interesting.
Or I think they can also go tackle here as well.
Yeah.
Trevor Penning?
It's Trevor Penning, yeah.
They have made their choice, and there are no successful vision quests on this selection for the Chargers. They have drafted Boston College's Zion Johnson with this selection, which I really appreciate. Zion Johnson was somebody who, for about half of our staff, carried first-round valuations as a football player. And he's played guard and he's played tackle throughout the course of his career. He, like Kenyon Green, is somebody we perceive to be someone who is going to be best playing inside at the offensive guard position at the next level. But we thought this was a scheme-transcendent player. You could play whether you wanted to run zone, you wanted to run inside, you wanted to run outside. Zion Johnson's capable of doing it. And I think having some of that positional flexibility may have helped him with this decision. Brentley, I'd love your reaction to the Zion choice for the Chargers.
I think it makes sense for what they want to do. Obviously, they had 2 pretty massive holes at right tackle or potentially at right guard, depending on what they do with Matt Filer. Well, this answers that question. Zion Johnson slides into right guard. Matt Filer kicks out to right tackle where he started, I think, 3 seasons for the Steelers, and he was a more than serviceable player, right? And so, you know, for me, that's a really good pick, an excellent fit. Protect your quarterback, and that's kind of what the Chargers need to do.
We have breaking news.
Oh, man.
The Philadelphia Eagles have traded for wide receiver A.J. Brown from the Tennessee Titans. So that has just come through. Terms of the deal not yet announced, but A.J. Brown, despite the posturing from John Robinson, we want to keep A.J. Brown and get a contract situation figured out. He's on the move. He is going from Tennessee to Philadelphia to join Devontae Smith, and obviously a lot of audible reactions here from this group. Let's talk about it.
Well, obviously, Tennessee had concerns about being able to pay him long term with the way that these receivers are going, right? It seems like the choice that you have now, if you have a great receiver, is you're going to either trade him and get everything you can and reset the position and get younger and potentially deeper, or you're going to sell out and you're going to be the team that pays him. And it seems like Philadelphia said, okay, we'll take him on. We're going to pay him. We want him long term. And Tennessee says, we like A.J. Brown, but we like the idea of accumulating, I'm sure, a lot.
18 and a third.
18 and a third. I mean,
which is technically more than what Kansas City got for Tyreek when you consider Kansas City got 29 and 50. You know, 18 is a lot higher in the queue.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big
younger player, maybe that plays into that.
Sure. Well, Tennessee's on the clock now. So we can kind of parlay this discussion.
Treylon Burks? Right.
Trevor Penning?
Sure.
Dre had it, and then I threw that name out there. He said, no, never mind, I want to take it back.
Just went blank, but yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you talk about the economics of the position, the economics of Tennessee and their individual situation. They're a team whose identity probably dictates them wanting to run the football, right?
But what does this do for Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you've seen Kyle Krabs, Ryan Tannehill without offensive weapons, right? You've seen him for a while, and
How dare you slander Jarvis Landry?
Maybe they can sign Jarvis Landry and bring it right back together.
but what
Brandon
He's a free
Gibson.
agent.
Ooh.
But what I'm saying is that a step back for him? Like, do you revert back to the old Ryan Tannehill, and what do you do offensively? Because I get it, right? Like you're a running football team, but if teams are able to put 8-9 people in the box because you don't have any receivers and you don't trust Ryan Ryan Tannehill can't beat you, then where do you go from here? So I think this is. I don't know. The Tennessee Titans, while they were contenders last year, this may be somewhat of a step back for them, depending on how they address the rest
About
of the
Traylon
offseason.
Burks here.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
That's his style of play as a receiver. His ability to be physical and block and dump him the ball in the flats on play action pass and let him win on the perimeter and one-on-ones and create yards after the catch. Physical profile similar to that of an A.J. Brown. So I think obviously in Green Bay's been widely tied to Traylon Burks here with that 22 pick. So this is a chance for Tennessee, who's picking at 26. You get up in front of a team that's been widely rumored to like the same player. I think it'll be really fascinating to see if that's ultimately the decision that they go.
So question is, do we think Traylon Burks can immediately step in and fill that role that A.J. Brown was playing? Like, just to, because they, like I said, the Titans, they played at a certain level last year. So you always want to get better, right? So are they better letting go A.J. Brown and then sliding Traylon Burks into that position?
I think the answer is definitely no, but I also think the answer is what receiver in this class could replicate A.J. Brown. I think the answer is probably none, at least.
Could just keep him.
At least in a rookie year. So my point is, though, like, is this the Titans, like, throwing in the flag, saying, hey, what we had.
We've hit the ceiling.
We hit the ceiling.
I've
And
said
that's
that.
to my point.
Reset button, maybe?
And that's what I'm saying. As a quarterback here, completely crazy.
No,
I know.
absolutely
I
not.
didn't even think about
I
that.
know that's what I'm saying. Like,
Malik's there, Desmond Ritter's there. They're all there.
Malik's
Yeah.
here. You don't have to play him next year. I think they could potentially get out Tano's contract
Yes,
next year.
and they need to.
Yes, they could.
You're not tying yourself to an expensive receiver right now. You're completely resetting your clock.
And they still have their original first-round pick.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Tennessee now has 2 first-round
That's
picks.
two first-round picks.
They also have needs on the
18 and
offensive
26.
offensive line is a need for them as well.
Right, that's why I'm looking here at Trevor Penning still on the board too, wondering if they're trying to get him.
They need a right tackle.
They
I
do.
mean, big time.
So
Tyler Smith.
How many times did we say yesterday we got some mocks that had New Orleans with Tyler Smith as a pick?
Right.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're one spot in front of New Orleans.
Here we are.
Here we are. And so we'll see.
Chestnut checkers.
So this has obviously been a very chaotic stretch. We saw the top 10 was fairly static. Teams content. Again, it came back to probably the price being too high to get that high in the draft. And now we're seeing a lot more movement here in the middle of this mock. I would ask each one of you guys what your most surprising move has been thus far, aside of A.J. Brown getting traded. You can't take the most recent one because I think that's certainly something that's caught us all off guard.
I'll say Carolina having their pick of offensive tackle. Right. I never thought that they would be able to sit there at 6 and all of them would be there. And so for me, that's what I would say is most surprising.
I would go with that the NFL has been disciplined thus far with the quarterbacks, right? Like, just because, don't
For
they
once?
usually – for once, right? Because they usually still bite on those quarterbacks, and then is the GM's overthinking stuff, or is this GM going to jump in front of the other one? And even though a guy we have him ranked as maybe a second-round guy, he wound up going in the top 10 because those GMs are trying to play mind games with each other, and they wound up outthinking it. So I think that's definitely a talking point.
I think for me, the surprise would be Drake London. While Drake's a great player, I didn't see him going that early when you consider the injury and so forth. So I think that would be my
Sauce
surprise.
at 4.
Sauce at 4. I could tell you the logic has come through in the clutch for us, gentlemen. Traylon Burks is the choice for the Tennessee Titans with this selection, which now makes it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, not a math guy. 6 wide receivers who have come off the board in the first 18 selections
That's nuts.
of this year's draft.
This is about what we thought, though, right?
Yeah.
Like even when we kept doing our mock drafts, we would have these wide receiver runs, and then it's like, man, like by the time we get to the Chiefs and the Packers, that's another
Patriots,
team
yeah.
sitting out there
Cardinals,
that need wide
yeah,
receivers, and we like, y'all not gonna have any wide receivers to draft. So, man, this is gonna get really interesting. We're gonna start seeing some of those other guys.
Does this
jump up.
potentially push the kind of tier 2 guys, like the Christian Watsons, possibly a George Pickens up towards the back of the first round because of the run we've seen?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I actually mocked Christian Watson to the Chiefs at what was it, 30? Around 30. So
I wouldn't be surprised
If
if
he
he's
goes
off the board
higher.
before that. I think about Green Bay, right? I mean, Green Bay, cold weather in the blustery, cold North Dakota, Wisconsin, and they like height, weight, speed guys. They've always liked height, weight, speed guys.
Yeah.
So I think that, that if they're going to draft for need here, and that you certainly have put yourself in that position with the decision to trade Devontae Adams and pay Aaron Rodgers, you got to get him something to work with at wide receiver. So it'll be fascinating to see when that next run comes. But that very deep wide receiver bucket has very quickly been exhausted through these first 18 picks. I do have terms on the A.J. Brown contract extension that's already been given out.
Done. Wow.
Yeah, they're not messing around. A.J. Brown got a 4-year extension for $100 million with $57 million in guarantees.
I would say watch for Debo to be extended by tomorrow. I think now that the one domino's fallen, Debo has, an idea of what his market now could be in comparison to A.J. Brown. I don't think there's any chance the Niners would ever trade Debo. And so now I think they can really start negotiating off of this contract. I think that gets done right in the next coming days.
Yeah, I think the Debo Samuel market is quickly exhausting itself too. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, many of these teams that need wide receivers, maybe one of these teams that we're talking about in the late 20s, maybe they would be willing to get desperate and make a maneuver and overpay for Debo, given that
Green Bay or KC.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Green Bay or Kansas City. I mean, maybe they panic and they go that route. And I wouldn't blame them at this point. I understand you got to pay the player, but for Kansas City, for both of them, they made the decision to get rid of their players because they didn't want to pay them. So maybe they don't. I think we just talked ourselves out of it here.
Well, they get younger. Though. That could have played into it.
I would say, but for the Eagles, though, they immediately put them at the top of the NFC East, right? Like, they made the playoffs last year. We can say the Cowboys have not made any splashes. They've actually, in my opinion, they've gotten worse.
For sure,
this
no doubt.
offseason, right? Yeah. The Commanders have they have question marks. The Giants they did a good job drafting, right? But we have to see them in 3 years. So I think that the Philadelphia Eagles felt like, this was our time to kind of, crown ourselves or at least make the push to become the best team in the NFC East.
This also goes to the point that, hey, we're putting all the chips in Jalen Hurts' bucket. You have to prove us something right now. Because don't they have multiple picks next year in the first round because of that? So, yeah, we've exhausted any excuses for you, bud. Like, you have 3 legitimate receivers. You have a tight end. Like, you have a good offensive line. You got to go out here and perform now. And if he doesn't, then they're going to look to go a quarterback next year.
This team has multiple first-round picks next year, in addition to all of the moves that they've made here tonight with Jordan Davis and adding A.J. Brown to the mix. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is the opposite of putting a developing quarterback around developing players, which we had the discussion with the New York Jets. You now have a lot more clarity after this year on what Jalen Hurts is and is not, because you've provided him a proven player to go with a very productive rookie in Devontae Smith.
I don't want to change the subject. I think this is the Eagles. What they've done is pretty incredible so far tonight. But we have the Saints and the Steelers back to back. I think we could see both the quarterbacks come off right now.
Both of quarterbacks being,
I think, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis in that order. I think that's what we could see right now.
Would not be. I mean, there were a lot of mocks that had trades involving these teams coming up to get quarterbacks. So we had the discussion about the NFL being disciplined.
Yeah.
And here we are with no quarterbacks through the top 18. And that certainly reflects, obviously, our quarterbacks column on the board here has been untouched. And you can see the void that does exist there at that first-round valuation. But this is a position that gets overdrafted. And you have teams that are in a unique position of having starting quarterbacks in middle economic contracts, but are not high-level starters, at least at this point in time. And this might be the right time because Jameis Winston's contract is a 1-year deal, and Mitch Trubisky's contract is 2 years, $15 million.
I think just staying with that same position, the two guys who could be falling as a result of guys like Strong and Sam Howell, right? Since the quarterbacks are being pushed down, they're two guys who could go much later than they anticipated.
I guess if it's not a quarterback for the Saints, Jermaine Johnson's still on the board. You just take the best player available. And
Offensive tackle is still there for them. There's Smith and Penning are both options that they can address that other glaring need that they have.
I wouldn't be surprised if they go there. I keep saying this, and I may be wrong in the next couple minutes, but I just know that they like Jameis Winston. And they feel confident in the fact of the last Hall of Fame guy they acquired, had an injury in Drew Brees. They bet everything on him. They got it right. And I think they like kind of pumping their fists and letting everybody know, like, we know how to do this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
You're not wrong about that, right?
So I don't think it's going to be a quarterback. And like I said, we'll find out in a couple minutes. I think they're going to address another positional need with that first-round pick.
I will say, just kind of big picture about this draft so far, one of the things I am surprised about, the corner run is not started.
That's true.
Right. We've only had 2 corners drafted so far, so I had over 4.5. I'm not feeling great about that right now, but that's surprising to me, to say the least.
Well, the pick is in, and Keith, you can go ahead and pump your own fist here for being right.
Man, come on, baby.
The New Orleans Saints, with the 19th overall selection, have elected to draft Trevor Penning, offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. This is a decision that obviously makes sense with the fact that they lost Teron Armstead in free agency, and you want to talk about economically getting cheaper at a position. Armstead getting paid up to $18 million a year with incentives from the Dolphins. So Penning is somebody who pairs with Ryan Ramczyk, gives you a really mean, nasty, physical 1-2 punch, can certainly combat the New York Giants' combo of Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal now is one of the meanest tackle combos in the game as far as the run game goes. And I'm sure Alvin Kamara is thrilled with this selection because Trevor Penning is one of the meanest, nastiest, most imposing players in this year's class.
Yeah, I think that they lost Teron Armstead, who was considered a great athlete or whatnot, but they haven't had someone as nasty in the trenches, just like Zach Strief played for him. I mean, so I think that this is somebody along those lines, getting back to a more physical brand of football.
They've had a lot of success with small school tackles too, right? When you mentioned Zach Strief, the Armstead small school player, even Ramczyk, just a one-year player at Wisconsin coming from the small schools. This is kind of the Saints going with the routes that they're familiar with, and it's working for them. And I really like this. I mean, you mentioned the pairing with Ramczyk, but don't forget about Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz on this line and Andrew Speed. I mean, this is a big
They respect the offensive line.
Yeah, they always do. And so I think you make a good point here about the Saints is they've told us what they are and their core principles, and then they just keep replicating them. And they're saying, hey, this is what we do. This is what's given us a lot of success, and they're going to keep sticking with it. And while Drew Brees isn't there anymore, Sean Payton's not there anymore, but all the other nuts and bolts of this organization are still in place.
So Chris Olave and Trevor Penning is the 1-2 punch for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
Jameis Winston's a happy man.
I'll say credit to Keith Sanchez because right when they made that trade with the Eagles, I wrote an article talking about how they're going to package those 2 picks and get a quarterback in the top 10. And I did not believe what Keith was saying was, hey, I think they're going to pick a receiver and tackle because they think they can win. And that's exactly what they did. So credit to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think they're saying we in win now mode. And when Joe Kyle in Arizona, we talked about it, right? This NFC overall is very weak, and they're right in position that, you know what, if Jameis Winston is somewhat, in between of what he was last year and what he was with the Bucs, can take care of the football, they're right in the running to be a top 4 team. So, why blow it up? And I think just them maneuvering up and down the draft, right? Everybody's like, damn, okay, they get another first-round pick, and then they jump up again, and then, they did what they had to do. So you have to give them credit the way they maneuvered the draft board.
They have a unique set of confidence too, because they beat the Bucs with consistency as well. So you're like, we just got to figure out the rest of the schedule, but we played Tampa Bay extremely well. So for them to go out and get Jameis Winston back and him be healthy this year and get a receiver that's vertical to complement Michael Thomas, who will also be back this year, and replace Teron Armstead with Trevor Penning, like, you see the vision. I guess my one question would be Penning and his pass sets is the one area of his game that I think we have some uncertainty about, him going to an offense that we're going to presume is going to do some deep set drop back passing with Chris Olave and trying to push the ball down the field with Jameis Winston's arm. It's a question to at least ask and be mindful of in the event that there are growing pains with him at the next level.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the thing that they've shown, though, is that they can draft a tackle and fail him there, move him inside the same way that they did the Pete kid, right? I mean, so playing him outside and failing them there, I'm sure they'll have no issues moving them inside the guard.
Yeah, the thing on my mind right now is as we've seen the Saints continue to prioritize the offensive line, and we go to the Chargers as well, who has revamped their offensive line. They just went and got Zion Johnson. You know, they got a nice young quarterback there in Justin Herbert. I go back to the Jets, and I know that this is really,
I'm with you, Joe.
You know what I'm saying?
No, seriously though, yeah.
No, you're right. You're right.
They need Zach Wilson to be an answer for them because they're at the bottom of the AFC. And what's going to get them out of the bottom of the AFC? It's going to be Zach Wilson realizing his potential. And as they continue to overlook the offensive line, and I know that they have AVT and they made a nice move for Laken Tomlinson, but George Fant finally had one good consistent stretch. Who knows what's happening with Becton? Who knows what's happening with that other their center position long term? I know that that's kind of a weird pivot there, but I think that all of this makes me more confirmed in the way I feel about the way the Jets have handled their picks this year.
We're going to have to interject because we have a quarterback off the board at number 20.
Okay.
Any guesses? The Pittsburgh
Malik.
Steelers have drafted a quarterback. And they're staying with the hometown kid.
Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett is our
QB1.
quarterback one,
Wow.
selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers with the number 20 overall pick. We're going to talk all about it, but after we come back from a brief break, gentlemen.
Wow.
I said they quarterback.
So we didn't quite have the explosive commercial break that we did last time when we took the break with the trades flurry that happened, but we did leave on quite the bang with Kenny Pickett as the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett, QB1, going off the board at number 20 overall. So let's talk about Kenny Pickett, his style of play, how it fits with Pittsburgh, the weapons that they have, the offensive system with Matt Canada. I think there's a lot of interesting storylines that we can touch on here as we react to this news that Pittsburgh, despite signing Mitch Trubisky, now brings Kenny Pickett into the fray.
I think I'll start. So it's surprising from the sense that throughout the entire process, Malik Willis was linked to the Steelers, right? And I think you could have easily went down the rabbit hole of, okay, they signed Trubisky as the veteran bridge. Malik Willis is probably the quarterback that you don't want to start year one. It makes sense, right? I had Pickett as my number one quarterback. I thought Pickett was better than Malik Willis. It also makes sense that they didn't sign Trubisky to a big-time deal. It was relatively small, all things considered. This is Kenny Pickett's job. I think Kenny Pickett's going to walk in there day one. He's an outstanding passer, really good decision maker, really good accuracy to all three levels. And he's an underrated athlete. And that's what I come back to. Like, is he Malik Willis? No. Is he Desmond Ridder? No. But you see him get on the move and use his legs. I mean, you saw him in the bowl game. He had like a 40-yard touchdown, right? I mean, on running, using his legs. And so I really like this pick. It's surprising, but to me, it's one that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's certainly interesting. I'm not sure how much different he is than Mitchell Trubisky when you think about what the ceiling is. And I know that might sound crazy because people are down on Mitch because Chicago didn't properly build around him, and so he failed there. And, he kind of rehabbed his image in Buffalo. But it's a little bit curious to me that they didn't really give him a real opportunity to take this job. And this, to me, just screams Kevin Colbert, last draft, need to set my team up with a quarterback, make sure I leave the house in good shape. And I feel like they could have done more to help their roster and really give Mitch a chance to be the guy in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think about Kenny Pickett and his skill set, what we've seen at Pittsburgh, and it's the fact that when everything is in order, right, when he could go through his progressions, 1, 2, 3, get the ball out, he was money, right? At that point, he looked like a top 10, top 15 pick. And then you think about this offense with Matt Canada, the motions, and then everything is quick. It's like, you know what? It kind of makes sense overall, right? And then, like Brentley talked about, he has some sneaky mobility because we know they have offensive line issues. So while I would have went Malik Willis here, I had Kenny Pickett ranked as my higher quarterback, and I think that just progression-wise, it makes sense just as far as the stylistics and the styles of the offense.
We do have a trade. Kansas City has traded up to number 21
they panicked
from the New England Patriots.
Has to be Johnson.
New England has received picks 29, 94, and 121 in exchange for Kansas City to move up to 21, and with that selection, they are going to draft Trent McDuffie, cornerback from Washington. So Trent
that is a Chiefs pick to a T.
Was RCB4, 5', 106, 193. The arm length was a little bit of a concern and probably contributed to a slide for a player that otherwise would have been long gone.
It's the only concern.
By now, by every other measure of quality play at the cornerback position. Brentley, you feel as though this is a classic Chiefs pick. Why don't you go ahead and tell us why?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the corners they've had recently, and L'Jarius Sneed, who, he's not the biggest or longest player. He's a feisty kind of corner. And even, the Honey Badger role, if they did want to kick him in the slot, they lost him, right? And so I think this is a guy who tackles. He has inside-outside versatility. To me, it just makes a lot of sense to really bolster that Kansas City defensive backfield.
He plays a lot of man, right? And that's what the Kansas City Chiefs love to do. They like to be physical with other teams opposing wide receivers, get up in the face and mirror them, down the field. And Trent McDuffie, next to Sting, might be the best man cover corner in this draft. And so, Kansas City's had long-standing issues at corner, and I think they got a player here that really translates well to the next level, gives versatility schematically, and gives them just a blue-chip player in terms of just the way he's wired, right? He's a high football character guy, loves the game, loves to study film, and he's going to come in and really, I think, help stabilize their secondary.
I think that he'll help not only help their secondary out, but this is someone who has great man skills. He's going to help their pass rush, and they've been trying to address the pass rush for a long time. I had them mocked with an edge, trying to address the pass rush, but actually getting a man cover corner will go a long way toward doing that as well.
Hold that ball a little longer, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So Kansas City, aggressive,
Yeah.
taking advantage of a falling talent that a lot of mocks we expected to potentially be CB3 that was coming off between 12 and 15 or 18 with Philadelphia and Minnesota in that range. And we now have Green Bay on the clock at 22. But before we get to the Packers, I do want to acknowledge New England choosing to move out of this pick, which I think is a little surprising. You know, obviously they have a ample history of moving down in the draft, but when you look at this team and their offseason that they've had thus far, them choosing to pass on getting a quality player, be it Trent McDuffie, or maybe they didn't like the length and they wanted a different player at the cornerback position, for them to defer for another quarter of the round is just a little surprising to me. Joe, you've mentioned you think this team has lost their best player on both sides of the ball this offseason.
And you've agreed with that.
I did. I did. They could be
Go
mad at both
figure.
of us.
Right,
That's fine.
yeah, we're going down together, brother. To me, I think this really goes back to my belief that they want a linebacker, right? And there's Quay Walker still there, Nakobe Dean's still there, and so I think there's no threat that they're going to not get their guy. So they get a few extra picks to round out a roster that needs a lot of help, in both of our opinion. And I think they'll still get the player they might have wanted to get here at 21 a little bit later.
So Green Bay, wide receiver. I mean, we mentioned Christian Watson. Sky Moore is kind of in this ballpark, as well as somebody who has a different style of play, but the Devontae Adams trade looms large. Is there any players on the board right now that you guys assess that might take precedent over top?
I think that
It has to be.
for me, it may be Christian Watson. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a reach, but with Aaron asking for a receiver for all these years, I don't think they've selected a wide receiver in the first round since 2002. I think it's about time.
What about Tyler Smith? You know, they definitely need an offensive lineman. He would help there. I agree. Christian Watson's in play. Edge rushers, Boye Mafe, George Karlaftis. Jermaine Johnson still hadn't been picked,
I
right?
was waiting for someone to say that name.
I was going to go Jermaine Johnson. You lose Zadarius Smith. I mean, you need an edge rusher opposite Rashawn Gary.
Yeah.
Jermaine Johnson should not be here. Like,
Is
this
there
insane.
something going on that we don't know about? Like, we've all loved Jermaine Johnson on film.
Still do.
And, you know, the people at home watching can maybe can tweet at us, but we're not on Twitter right now. So if there is, you know, some injury or character concerns, we're not privy to that as we're live. But in terms of talent, there's absolutely zero reason Jermaine Johnson should be on the board.
Like he's 23 maybe?
Okay. So I turned around and I checked the board here.
I'm looking at what side of the board you're walking to.
I'm going on the defensive side of the board for the Green Bay Packers. And we used an adjective earlier to describe a pick, and it was described as insane.
Oh, boy.
Oh, God.
And I would certainly love to hear Brentley Weissman's reaction to knowing that Quay Walker is our linebacker one. He's off the board before Devin Lloyd, and the Green Bay Packers have drafted him at number 22 overall.
I don't.
We joked about this earlier, though. We joked about
This started on
Do you wanna
Spaces
put it
first
on
thing
the
this
board?
morning.
Short? Where are we?
He's down here.
Oh, yeah, that's my speed.
Go ahead.
That's
I'll let you get your thoughts. You go ahead and slap that on the board for the Packers. Who else has thoughts on Quay Walker? Let's talk about the upside of Quay Walker, right? Because that's what this decision is. It's about explosive physical qualities.
Yes, I mean, he's someone that's about 6'4", 240. He's got great size and can run. He's physical. He plays downhill. He has all the physical things that you like. So my knock about the pick isn't necessarily about the player. I just think they needed some other things that were maybe more pressing needs than linebacker.
Premium positions.
Absolutely.
Tackle,
especially in the
edge,
first
receiver.
round. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Joe, you don't like this pick either.
No, yeah, I don't like this at all. I mean, especially because they brought back the linebacker Campbell, right? And I thought that he was a really nice player for them, and it just felt like this was an opportunity for them to legitimately do things to help Aaron Rodgers after they said goodbye to his go-to player, whether that was a Christian Watson or an offensive tackle or Jermaine Johnson to help the pass rush. I just feel like of all the things they could have done here, there were just so many more meaningful ways that they could have helped their football team with players that are worth the pick.
I just want to know, how did they break down this roster and say,
Bro.
you know what, more than anything else, we need a linebacker.
Speak on
You know, like what happened? Like you said, they need wide receiver. Y'all don't even kind of need it. It's not like a plus. Y'all don't need a 1.5. Y'all don't need a 2. Like, y'all need a wide receiver. Like, y'all need a guy.
What do you think Aaron Rodgers' reaction is? Right
Oh
now?
my goodness, I can't even imagine.
He probably just
He's
did
retiring
another
next
withdrawal
year.
at the bank.
Right.
That's all. He
Right,
just,
yeah.
They needed a wide receiver even prior to them losing to
Devontae Adams.
Right.
Now they really need one.
All right, Joe, I'm going to let you have this moment. The Bills have traded up to 23.
So they jumped who at 24?
They gave up 25 and 130.
Dallas, Joe.
Don't want to get ahead of Dallas.
Over Dallas to get into the 23 spot, 423.
Elam.
So a fourth-round draft selection was the cost to move up.
Elam.
They must have some level of concern that Dallas would have picked a player or somebody would have traded up in front of them to snipe them. And they've been linked to Breece Hall, the running back, Iowa State.
Not sure that's a concern with Dallas.
Right, that shouldn't be. But, the corners are starting to go. So could they Andrew Booth or Kyler Gordon?
Elam.
Any chance of Kyer Elam as well?
Kyer Elam, yeah, all those guys.
I think it could be corner, and that's because they have Trayvon Diggs, but the other side has been an issue. And then also, second-year Kentucky cornerback Kelvin Joseph had his situation. So, they could be thinking the Cowboys are going to take a corner, and they had to jump in front of them because the Cowboys may be taking their corner.
Joe, I have a question for you. Could it be Tyler Smith?
Yeah.
I asked because
Yes.
what if they view him as a guard?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. And so Dallas, they might be viewing him as a right tackle, but Buffalo might be viewing him as a guard.
I've talked about Tyler Smith to the Bills. You guys know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've put him in mock drafts. I think it's very possible.
He's a Bills player, too, a Bills type of
Oh, for
player.
sure.
Physical,
Yeah.
tough.
Steps in for
Trade
Saffold
seed.
after 1 year.
After
Trades.
Saffold, yeah.
I got to be a corner, though, I guess. Could be Breece Hall.
I mean, you've
It's a
talked
first
extensively about how cornerback is not something, that CB2 position is not something that they've coveted.
I know, but Kyle,
Joe-
the dream for me is always going to be alive that they will covet that cornerback position.
Someday.
But the problem is CB1's an issue right now because Trey White is coming off of an ACL tear in late November.
Could this be Dax Hill?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I would love that, too.
would be about Jordan Poyer, who's wanting to get a contract extension and getting tight on money, and Jordan Poyer's just coming off an All-Pro season, but he's definitely a player that as you look at how expensive this roster is becoming, you can get Daxton Hill and be 1 year away from it.
The pig is in.
All right.
I want your opinion. I don't want anybody else's opinion. But what's your opinion?
The way you just look said
Right.
Breece Hall.
It's not Breece Hall.
Oh, wow.
So we can bond over that.
All right.
It's a good football player.
It is a corner.
It's a position.
It's a
It's
corner.
a corner.
Say no more.
It's Andrew Booth.
Elam.
Tariq Woolen.
Kyer Elam?
Told you.
All right. Bills got a
University of
corner.
Florida.
That's the first name
Wow.
I said. I said it was Elam.
Joe,
They did it. They did it.
6014,
we finally did it.
191,
Yeah.
31-inch arms, verified 439,
Yeah.
which I think is an important note because speed in the secondary was something that some teams have been able to kind of exploit and
Yeah.
challenge the Bills secondary with in big games.
Yeah, so I think what's exciting about Kyer Elam going to the Bills in a defense that's going to run a lot of zone is how we all agree that Kyer Elam, might have the best ball skills of any corner in this class. And while he didn't play a ton of zone at Florida, I think we all agree that that's a nice fit for him where he can keep his eyes in the backfield, cue the backfield, work in the throwing lanes, and use his ability to disrupt and create some game-changing plays on the football. And certainly a guy that tested athletically very well. He's a younger player. The Bills have gravitated towards the younger cornerbacks. And so I just felt like I've preached that the need this year is just too big for it to be just another Joe Marino begging for a CB2 when CB1's kind of a concern going into the season. And so you got, Miami's building this passing attack with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all the passing attacks across this conference that the Bills want to be the number one seed in. They addressed a very critical area of need, in my opinion. So
I think that they picked the best zone, the best corner that can play in zone, and that was left on the draft board. So
without the injury concerns with Booth, right? Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
absolutely.
his ball skills are definitely one of his better qualities that really pop. And you think about how much ball hawking does happen in that Bills secondary, and it's a really nice complementary piece to put on the other side. So kind of rounding out if you told me you'd replace Levi Wallace with Kyer Elam, I think you'd be pretty excited about the athletic upgrade.
You know, Kyle, when you put it like that,
tell me I'm wrong.
no, you're not.
that.
Yeah.
No, I flat out like it, and I think that obviously how the season ended last year, right? They went into last year's season like, you know what, we'll outscore everybody. But, you know, it's like that's a crapshoot at the end of the day, right? And then you leave that up to refs and a coin toss, right? We're not leaving it up to happenstance anymore. So it's like, you know what, instead of complaining about it, we're going to get better defensively. So they went and got Von Miller. We're going to get after a quarterback. And then now we're going to get a corner and double down on that. So it's just really about getting a complete team, right? Like getting a complete team, rounding that out, and kind of opposite of what the Cardinals decided to do, double down in the passing attack. They said, you know, we'll get some defensive pieces and really put together a complete football team.
So we have the Dallas Cowboys on the clock at 24.
Oh, man.
Jerry Jones wanted Randy Gregory to re-sign.
Yep.
Who's still on the board? I mean, this is getting ridiculous.
Karlaftis, Mafe, Jermaine Johnson.
Jermaine Johnson.
Tyler Smith.
You can
absurd.
will him to be picked all you want. He's still
I know.
has not
I'm
been
operating under the assumption he's been picked because it doesn't make any sense that he's not there. I'm like, oh, yeah, Karlaftis and Mafe, they're still here.
If I'm
So is
Jerry
Johnson.
Jones, I'm running this card to the table.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
gosh,
not wasting
right.
time.
This is
How do you negotiate the offensive line, though? Because if you were
said
going
Tyler
to be
Smith.
drafting for need, they need offensive linemen. They lost Connor Williams. They lost Lyle Collins. Travis Frederick retired last year. They're in a bad way up front versus what the standard has been in Dallas.
I guess, who are the names that you were?
Tyler Smith.
Tyler Smith, maybe a Linderbaum? Is it rich for him? I mean, for me personally, no, but
I don't know that I'd love him in that offense.
Right.
That scheme, yeah. They're more of a power run scheme.
Yeah.
He's more of a zone blocker. So I'd say no for Tyler, but
But what is fascinating here is our valuations, obviously, we're grading players through all 32 players. But as you go up here and you do kind of look at kind of the talent distribution that exists that's left on the board, first of all, it's a great time to be picking and needing defensive talent, right? As compared to, you can see just how empty this is. Here's your offensive tackles. Our evaluations of the players, which are not scheme-specific and team-specific, which is important to note, we got a very large void here. This is about the ugliest void that you have outside the tight end position that's left. So if you are a team that's hungry for an offensive lineman, it might be now or never for you if you need a starter. So that's the challenge for guys like Tyler Smith, who is incredibly talented, but 16 holding penalties last year.
Maybe
whatever.
more.
Super raw player, right? And I think that's also a challenge for a team like Dallas, who, you know, they're expecting to compete. You know, they won the division last year. They're looking to get a plug-and-play starter. I don't know that they're going to find it, even if they take an offensive lineman here.
or could they pick Lele too to plug him in at right tackle with the loss of Lyle Collins?
Yeah, the physical potential there is really interesting, right? I mean, this is somebody who didn't play the game until he had recruiting offers from like 40 different programs from playing in Australia, and he ended up coming to the States, and he played at IMG for 2 years, and then he's at Minnesota. He sat out a year in 2020 with the COVID concerns and the pandemic that happened, and those reps. You certainly watch him play, and you see all the potential that he has.
Sure, and he's not a first round guy. I mean, but for somebody who they may not feel that they can get on day two, I mean, it may cause them to reach.
What about Daxton Hill?
I love it.
A versatile defender in Dallas' secondary. He can be a nickel. He can be a free safety. You like him in the run game. I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense, especially with pick 24. That's excellent value, too.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what Dallas has lost this offseason and what we've perceived their needs to be. It's so easy to talk about the offensive line, and obviously they've been hunting for a pass rusher opposite DeMarcus Lawrence, who's long-term player, and obviously Gregory's return was a big jump and jolt for them, but not something that they were able to succeed in. But that's another spot on this defense that they played a little bit more diverse in the secondary this year with Gus Bradley than what Gus has traditionally done. And I think because of that, Daxton Hill's versatility might be a nice layer to throw into the mix here.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to get crazy, the Cowboys have always valued linebackers. Thinking about Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, right? They like having at least two solid inside linebackers. And Devin Lloyd, to me, is one of the best players available.
Is there a chance they go wide receiver?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's real. Like, they got Christian Watson out there, who's a 4'3" guy, 6'4". Give Dak Prescott another option. Jerry Jones likes the flash, right? He likes making the flash pick. Is there a chance that they do it, right? We're talking about the Dallas Cowboys here. So, man, it's interesting. And going back to the Bills, I definitely think they got word that they're probably going to go after Kyer Elam.
Surely, yeah.
He would have been perfect in that scheme too in Dallas. Right? You got Trayvon Diggs and Kyer Elam on either side like that. That would
the interceptions would be had.
Third round last year. Right. To draft Kyer Elam. I mean, you better not be in the corner market when you drafted Nashawn Wright in the top 100 last year. I mean, but yeah, they need playmakers and they like length that a guy like Kyer Elam has. But I think that's what's interesting about Daxton too, because of all the play at safety and nickel corner. He's got some extension to him too. Like he's not a short-arm defensive back, and we've heard some teams view him as somebody who could play on the outside as a corner. So that's kind of the big mystery here: is whatever team drafts Daxton Hill, what's your long-term vision for him? And I think that makes him somebody who's a total wild card here in the last 8 picks of the first round.
I was just going to say, to Keith's point, if Buffalo felt that they had to get in front of Dallas for Kyer Elam, why not Kyler Gordon or Andrew Booth, right? I mean, or even Tariq Woolen.
Fair point.
If we want to get crazy.
Yeah. Well, and Jerry Jones has kind of come out recently and said, like, sometimes you have to go against the grain, right? Sometimes you have to be different. And so maybe this is a situation where we're set up for a surprise, but I'm thinking O-line here. I'm thinking Tyler Smith as their target.
They are taking every ounce of the clock.
And that just lets you know that they wanted Kyer Elam. They're scrambling right now.
Or they're calling teams, yo, who wants Jermaine Johnson, right? Because, I mean, at this point in time.
I mean, that's the Bills would have had good intel if that's truly the case because – yeah, I mean, it feels like we've talked about this Dallas pick for a while. We're just kind of like, all right, Kyle, you got it?
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting here and I got 5 sets of eyeballs like, all right,
come on. And you even went to the board earlier. I was like, oh, that wasn't the pick.
So. I'm going to go again, but this time I do have the pick with
all right.
me. So we filibustered long enough here. We figured this out. Joe, I'm going to give you the chance. I don't have to check heights on the board with this one. I'm going to let you put this one on the board. Tyler Smith
let's go, baby.
is the draft selection for the Dallas Cowboys. That's all right. They lost Connor Williams, so they got a quota they got to fill.
Right.
They don't care about the holding penalties. Go ahead and throw them up there on the Dallas Cowboys.
No.
Yes.
So, Joe, you were on Tyler Smith pretty early. Come on back to your chair here. Who else's reactions to Tyler in the meantime? Go ahead, Trey.
Me, I called it. No, I said it was Smith, but I think when you look at when they've had success in recent years, they've had a physical offensive line, and so they could be trying to get their offensive line back to there to have some success to be able to run the football, take some of the pressure off of Dak, and they do that with a nasty physical offensive lineman in Tyler Smith. It also says that they see him possibly playing right tackle.
Yep.
Right. So
I mean, they cut Lyle Collins for the strangest reasons you've ever heard of.
Sure.
Tyron Smith, certainly aging, and there's been some durability issues there. Foundation of Dallas Cowboys, like in recent years and in their glory years, has been offensive line. And while Tyler Smith has a lot of technical work ahead of him for him to reach his ceiling, I think even some of the people that are down in him recognize that if he does reach his ceiling, this guy can be a really nasty player that has length. He's one of the youngest players in the class. He can create displacement in the run game. It's just about getting the technical side down, and I think they can have a really, really high-impact starter.
We can't forget they lost Connor Williams, too, at left guard.
Yep.
And so while I do think Tyler Smith is probably going to be a tackle, losing Connor Williams, there's a hole along the side of the interior, so if it doesn't work out with him at right tackle, he could be a guard as well.
So now we have Baltimore back on the clock.
Jermaine Johnson.
Are we going to sit here and be surprised that the Baltimore Ravens
If they get
it's
Jermaine.
got to be Jermaine
what on
Johnson.
earth is happening?
It's got to be Jermaine Johnson.
Oh, man.
It's got to be.
They would get
beside
two
us.
top 10 players on probably everyone here's board.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because we actually do, as we wait on this pick to come in, we do have a couple of teams that did get a pair of top 10 picks or top 10 values according to TDN. The New York Giants
Yeah.
With their selections, Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal were 4th and 5th on TDN's consensus rankings this year. So
we have good taste.
And they weren't the only one as well. So you also have the Jets. Who else picked twice?
Jets.
Houston picked twice. I wouldn't think they did it.
Detroit.
Jameson and Aidan. Yeah.
Jamison Williams was 9th, and Aidan Hutchinson was 2nd. So I had that thought about 16 picks ago before the chaos happened, and I'm glad we could steer back. So Baltimore does have that chance with Kyle Hamilton, who was at 1. Jermaine Johnson was our 8th rated prospect this year.
Is there anybody else that we could consider?
I was thinking about corner.
Corner.
Like
Go ahead.
If they address this, like they have one of the best young secondaries.
Booth is
moving.
7th. So
you
can do it.
If they walk away with that, that's crazy, right? Like who thought they'd walk away with Andrew Booth?
How concerned should we be about the loss of Hollywood Brown and them needing receiver help, right? They don't have that player now.
Who are you going to draft here, though?
Well, nobody, but I'm just saying, like, I know that's a little bit outside the box, but, like, do we introduce wide receiver as a need for Baltimore that we didn't necessarily have going into the night?
We're going to have to moving forward, I think so, for sure.
I think that you still get a guy like Calvin Austin, on day 2. I mean, like, there are speed guys that can fill that role, and you still got an extra pick for Brown, so...
I'm personally rooting for a corner. I have money on the line here, so Baltimore help me out. But I think the best pick would be Jermaine Johnson, obviously. We've been saying this since what? Pick 7? Pick 8?
Yeah.
It's like
Pick after
this
pick.
is insane.
And we said Kyle Hamilton was best player available for 13 picks before they picked him at 14. So obviously that's what Baltimore, as we joked about earlier, has a track record of doing. But I do think just a note here, and I don't know that I love the stylistic fit between his skill set and Baltimore's offense. But Tyler Linderbaum, they lost their starting center in free agency with Bradley Bozeman, who played over 1,100 snaps. So Tyler Linderbaum sitting on the board here, you're in the late 20s. I understand there's some size concerns. He's not traditional build. You like him more in zone. But a team that runs the ball as often as Baltimore likes to when they're healthy, and the speed to the perimeter to kind of help prevent you from getting too far upfield too quickly. I think maybe there's some opportunities there for Tyler Linderbaum should they choose to go with an offensive lineman and draft for need that way.
I just think that you can get someone that's more impactful in Johnson now and still be able to get a center who starts for you on day 2, because if you draft Linderbaum now, you may not be able to get as impactful as an edge guy on day 2, the other way around. So
we're sitting here on this pick coming in, and I am sitting here around the table, and I'm admiring how good everybody looks. Everybody's dressed sharp. We got some nice colors here, and we're decked out with our friends over at Legends. We've co-partnered to do the Draft Legends campaign, which you guys will learn about all throughout the course of this weekend. And if anybody, I'm a big subscriber, you got to look good to play good, right? And I feel like we're all playing really well here at the table because we look good, and that's thanks to our friends over at Legends. So if anybody at home is interested in getting in on the fun themselves, you can use TDN20 as a promo code and get yourself some of this really outstanding gear that Legends has put together for yourselves. But I just wanted to give everybody a nice little compliment here as we're getting close to the end of the first round. And Keith, really brings out your eyes.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. Man. Especially the color complexion, too.
Right.
Like the skin tones, it's really popping on all these cameras. So
Joe,
I definitely like
yours really complements your hair.
I spent a lot of time getting this hair right, so best possible hair, but Legends certainly makes it possible for me.
So we're sitting here waiting on the Baltimore Ravens pick to come in, and we've kind of gone through corners. Is there any other corners that you guys reflect on that might make sense here? I know we mentioned Andrew Booth. Go ahead, Damien.
He's kind of a project, but a Tariq Woolen. Having that height, the length, the athleticism. Marcus Peters is, 30, 31. He's coming off the ACL.
And he's expensive.
Yeah, and he's due for a contract. Corner is a need, if they don't want to go Jermaine Johnson. So I definitely see like a Tariq Woolen if they don't look at it. I'm not sure if there's anything medically going on with Andrew Booth specifically, But, I see Tariq Williams being that long kind of corner that can run with these receivers in their division.
Joe, you're the regional scout for the ACC, and I know you've been a big fan of Booth for a long time. So kind of refresh everybody's memory about the medical questions that do exist
he's
here.
got them. He just had a double hernia surgery. He couldn't work out because of a quad issue, I think torn quad. And then he's got a right knee patella thing and maybe some concerns over the neck there. So there's a laundry list here because when we watch Andrew Booth, this is one of the best 10 players in the draft on tape. There are concerns there with the medicals, and double hernia is funny. There's some guys that, look at Colby Listenby out of TCU several years ago, had the double hernia. Yeah, you guys were reminded of that name, but you were like, oh, what did he do in the NFL? No, nothing, because he never played because he never got right from that double hernia. So there are some medical concerns with Booth.
Allow me to have this moment for myself, because Baltimore has drafted Tyler Linderbaum, the center for Iowa, with this selection. And
Good job.
maybe a non-traditional fit as far as what we typically associate. But Linderbaum, I think the athleticism here is going to be a really big weapon for an offense that has speed in the backfield between Lamar Jackson and also J.K. Dobbins coming back healthy. That's a really exciting opportunity for them to really work in an athlete that can kind of help and maybe get involved in the screen game, the outside run game, release to the second level, pick off those linebackers, make sure Lamar, if he gets outside that outside man on the line of scrimmage, there's no second level flow that's going to help contain, right? So this to me feels like Baltimore kind of embracing the run game on both sides of the ball. You think about Kyle Hamilton and now Tyler Linderbaum, you don't associate him with being a run game weapon because he's not a mauler in that capacity, but the mobility is really rare. And I think this is a unique opportunity for them to complement that.
It's that range, right? It's incredible range. But think about the rest of the makeup of this line where your tackles are Morgan Moses, Ronnie Stanley, Kevin Zeitler, Ben Powers out of Georgia. Big, massive dudes that, if you're concerned about powerful men being stacked up on top of Linderbaum, that's okay. He's got really good bumpers in place, and that allows him to use his range, not just, getting to the second level, but on some longer poles, which plays really well into the style of offense that Baltimore likes to operate.
Pass protection for Lamar Jackson as well, right in front of him. That gives him a trustworthy option to where he can drop back and, again, feel comfortable with his entire offensive line.
I think this is another just kind of player where you want to look at what he does well and maybe not what he doesn't do as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, the range is outstanding. The hand use is outstanding. Just the overall instincts and football IQ are all outstanding. He was my 9th overall player on my big board. And for Eric DeCosta, who, again, I think he just goes BPA, I'm believing that he's probably pretty high on Linderbaum as well. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had him in the top 15. And so, getting that kind of anchor on your offensive line in front of Lamar, to me, just makes so much sense. And so I love this pick.
He was our 13th rated prospect. So while they didn't make it 3 teams with 2 consensus top 10 players, it makes it 3 teams with 2 consensus top 15 players in the class. And maybe we'll get a 3rd here or a 4th here because the New York Jets have traded up to 26.
Okay.
I mean, if they're going to make us eat some crow if they get Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah, they will.
Oh, that's got to be what this is for.
Yeah.
You would assume. And Linderbaum just came off, right? So that was a popular opportunity for them to add to the center of the offensive line as well with the wide zone system that they play.
Could they go linebacker here and get Devin Lloyd and address that situation?
I think they could do just about anything.
That would fall right into their first 2 picks. You know what I mean?
Oh, jeez, Joe.
Crazy.
Redeem yourself. Go get Jermaine right now.
Yeah, go get
right
Jermaine
now.
I will say in that style of defense, that Robert Saleh, the cover 3 scheme, linebackers are very, very important to that scheme. So I don't think it's crazy if they did want to go Devin Lloyd because you need linebackers you can cover in that defense.
Terms of the trade are in. Titans trade 26 and 101 for 35, 69 and 163. And with pick 26, the Jets do indeed select Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah,
let's go.
There you go, Joe Douglas.
From Florida
Now you just
State.
flip them around in a different order.
Yeah,
You're right.
the same players that he was
Right.
targeting.
Whatever mental gymnastics we got to play,
Sure.
right? I mean, we say here, this is an excellent value for us.
Good
We
job,
obviously
JP.
love his play. He popped at the Senior Bowl in a big, big, big way. And we've known that they've wanted another pass rusher to go opposite Carl Lawson, who missed time this year. So let's talk about Jermaine Johnson, the football player, and why he was somebody that the Jets ultimately did decide after passing on him, and we heard rumors he might be a top 5 pick, to come back up and get him.
He's a stud. I mean, he's a balanced football player against the run. He gets after the quarterback. There's so many different ways that he can get home and beat blocks. High effort player, length, size, athleticism. I'm not sure what's missing. The ACC Defensive Player of the Year this past season.
Dominated the Senior Bowl.
Dominated the Senior. I mean, he's aced everything along the way. I mean, this is a steal for Joe Douglas and the Jets.
I think if you feel good, if you're Joe Douglas, you feel good about Mekhi Becton and George Fant.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable. And I know we spent a lot of the draft kind of, making fun of the Jets, yada yada yada. But you're able to walk away with you're able to walk away with Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and now Jermaine Johnson. And you still technically have 2 bookend tackles for your quarterback if it works out with Mekhi Becton. I don't think they could have done it better.
And you still have 38.
Wow, yeah.
At your disposal.
It's crazy that one player can change the whole perception of the draft.
Well, when you get a player you perceive that would have been a perfectly good pick at 4 or 10, and they get him at whatever we are, 20-something here, I mean, that changes it.
Exactly.
So the Jets do make it 4 teams that get 2 players in our consensus top 10. Jermaine Johnson was 8th, and Ahmad Sauce Gardner was 10th. So, and Garrett Wilson was somebody who we had coveted in the 20s range. So, I know there's some people that thought Garrett Wilson was the top wide receiver in the class, and we weren't quite there with him, but you obviously know what the appeal is, especially in a run-after-catch style offense. So I think each one of these picks for the Jets has made sense for their vision for the player. It's just maybe we didn't agree with the positional value and prioritization of how they got there.
I think the thing also when you think about adding Jermaine Johnson to his defensive line, you have Quinion Williams, you have John Franklin Myers, who are guys on the interior who demand and command, attention. So Carl Lawson comes back healthy. Now you have 2 guys on the edge that can see more one-on-one coverage against. I keep going back to it. You got to pressure Josh Allen with 4 men. You got to, and that's why I love this pick the most, because at the end of the day, you got to continue to build. You need building blocks, and they have 3 building blocks: 2 on defense and 1 to help Zach Wilson.
Hey, why don't you show Tua some love, man? You got to pressure Tua too, all right? Give Tua some respect.
I love Tua.
So we can find a new storyline now. Jermaine Johnson was drafted. Okay, so we can find something else to obsess about here with these last couple of picks. But I will say this: Tampa Bay is now on the clock at 27, and they're a really interesting team to try to diagnose what direction they are going to go. They're a team 13-4. They had the retirement of Ali Marpet. They had the departure of Ndamukong Suh. On a wide receiver, they did bring in Russell Gage. They brought back Chris Godwin after a franchise tag this past year.
They lost Jordan Whitehead.
They did lose Jordan Whitehead, I think. And safety is a spot that I think I really like for them, whether it is Dax Hill or Lewis Seen from the University of Georgia. We'll see how many Georgia Bulldogs get their names called here, and if Seen can sneak in as well.
Dre got a big one.
I got somebody. I think that Tampa would be best served here to go Devontae Wyatt, who is one of the best interior D linemen in this draft. He's someone who's a single gap guy. I think they run more of a 4-3 scheme. Him playing next to Vita and freeing him up on the inside, yikes. This would be a great pick for him.
We have a trade.
Oh.
So it makes a ton of sense. And maybe laughing because they didn't trade back too far. They only traded to 33.
Okay.
Jacksonville has come back into the first round, trading 33, 106, and 180 to go to 27. So when you think about Jacksonville, we associated them as maybe being a team that would be offensive line friendly, specifically on the interior with that first selection that they made. They've come back up. As you guys kind of look at the value distribution, any names that pop out to you guys?
I think it's a corner.
Ooh,
I think it's a corner.
Really?
Yeah.
Tyson Campbell, they just paid Shaq Griffin? I don't think so.
They just traded C.J. Henderson.
They traded C.J. Henderson.
Yeah,
so
but they have guys there.
Receiver? Yeah, it's not corner.
I think it's a corner.
They just cut Miles Jack. Devin Lloyd sitting right there. Yeah. They need safety as well. Some of the safeties we just talked about for Tampa could be in play.
They lost Miles Jack.
Right.
It could be
Devin Lloyd, the quarterback.
It could be
defense.
Devin Lloyd.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that at all. I think that would be a home run.
Be a great player,
Yeah.
regardless of positional value. Devin Lloyd, and the fact that
Teams do that. They trade back in for the linebackers all the time, and Kenneth Murray and Jordan Brooks.
yeah,
I mean, Devin Lloyd has no business being available, if you ask me. I mean, I think he's one of the cleanest prospects in this entire draft.
Especially
and
after this year.
Not just the cleanest, but he also has high upside. Like, this is a player who can affect the game literally in all phases, as a run defender, in coverage, as a blitzer.
Rush, yeah.
Like,
I guess I'm a little confused where he's a sub-athlete narrative kind of came from. I mean, because he ran in the 4.6s at the combine as a 335, 340-pound linebacker.
I think it's more so just when we think about the passing, just some of those freak linebackers, right? Like we had Michael Parsons, or just linebackers in the past that ran those 4.3s, and it's like it's almost every player gets associated with that year by
Devin
year.
White, Devin Bush.
Yeah, you have to perform to that level. But while Devin Lloyd isn't that as a player, what he offers you as a linebacker, edge rusher, blitzer, he offers you high linebacker level play, right? Okay, he doesn't run a 4.3, but you don't need that to be an effective and really talented linebacker.
And the thing about speed too is like you have to pair the speed with instincts, right? Because if you're not smart, it don't matter if you run a 4.1, right? And you're slow processing and you can't get to the ball. Whereas if you're Dean, right, or Lloyd, they're not as fast time, but they're so instinctive they get to the ball fast and play downhill.
Could it be Dean? I know you just said.
I got a name here. How about Dax Hill? They got Andrew Wingard penciled in as a starting safety for this team.
You got to fix that.
And whether it's Seen or whether it's Dax Hill, I mean, I think there's a couple of guys here that would make a ton of sense for them if they wanted to go with a secondary player. And obviously we've had the safety debate as well, but it's a mismatched league.
Well, we've learned that they're going to go with Trent Baalke and his tendencies. And so as we kind of try to figure this out, is there anything that aligns there as we think back on Trent Baalke's resume? That
traits, and injured players.
So they all fit then, right? I guess that didn't help us narrow anything down, but
I mean, injured players, that's kind of Trent Baalke's thing in the past.
Right, the safety is probably Daxton Hill if they go safety, but
they have not gone safety. That's all I'll tell you. I'd ask everybody for their best guess. It's not a safety because the pick is in.
Devin Lloyd.
I'm going to go off the wall. Is it a tight end?
Tight end, Devin Lloyd.
I'm going to go edge rusher. Boye Mafi, Arnold.
They're going to double dip.
I'm doing a double dip, baby.
Spicy Sanchez strikes again.
I'm going to go linebacker, Lloyd.
Devin Lloyd.
I'm going all kind of off the wall. I'm going wide receiver Christian Walton.
It is Devin Lloyd,
Cool.
linebacker from Utah. I'm glad we got him in.
I should have just stuck with my gut.
There's no question Devin Lloyd, from a resume perspective, has earned this with his play this year. Dre, you watched him in the summer. You watched him in season. You wrote the report on him this winter.
Yeah.
When you reflect on Devin Lloyd and his growth as a football player this year, what stands out the most to you?
I think the thing that stands out the most is going into the year, I thought he was more of a two-down guy. And I think that he proved this year that he could play on 3 downs. He's still a downhill thumper, right? But the thing that really stood out to me this year was that he made it an exceptional number of plays in a passing game, some splash plays, and his true 3-down value gave me comfort with choosing him here. I think there's still a little bit of stiffness with him in space, but he's certainly a guy that can play on early downs. He can play in a passing game. I think they'll like that about him.
I was going to say what Joe said earlier about being the quarterback of your defense. Devin Lloyd's intangibles, his character, his leadership, are off the charts. And for a team like Jacksonville, is all they've known is losing since, 2017 when they made it to the AFC Championship game. They need culture changers, and I think that's exactly who they're getting in Devin Lloyd. And not to mention all the things that Dre already said, just in terms of his football ability, that speaks for itself. But I think it's also the intangibles that really probably got Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson excited about this player.
Well, remember Trent Baalke, San Francisco, Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis. Like maybe that was the answer I was looking for when I kind of brought that back to the table, and he's kind of staying true to those tendencies.
And think about a polar opposite player of Miles Jack, really, as far as like Miles Jack's always been super explosive, super dynamic, and But instincts and consistency with his keys always has been one of the more sore spots in his game, whereas Devin Lloyd, not as dynamic, but we've mentioned the intangibles and the football IQ that exists there and the consistency in diagnosing plays, and I think that's an area that is more of a strength as they do look to solidify in a division in the AFC South where they're going to pound the rock. You are going to get tested. So now you've added one of the best run-defending linebacker or defensive linemen in the class in Trayvon Walker, and now you've drafted yourself a true Mike linebacker in Devin Lloyd to go with him. So you can see the vision here is getting that front seven right.
Yeah, I think this front seven has a lot of versatility to it. Like, you can do so many different things because we talked about Devin Lloyd, we talked about his player profile. This guy that has sacks as an edge rusher, right? Like, they literally lined him up on the edge, and we talked about his little pass rush move. It's very unorthodox, but it's effective at the end of the day. So I think you think about Trayvon Walker having him outside, inside. You think about Josh Allen putting him outside, dropping him in coverage. You think about Devin Lloyd being able to do multiple things with him. It's a lot of different things that, the defensive coordinator, he can be like, okay, I got a lot of toys that I can work with, and I don't have to, I guess, be a tendency guy, right? Like, I can break tendencies week to week and really show offensive a bunch of different things.
So we have the Green Bay Packers now back on the clock. They made the surprise selection of Quay Walker at 22 after the Patriots traded out of that spot, and we pretty consistently heard, hey, that might be a spot for Quay Walker in New England. And then Green Bay took advantage of that when they moved out. So the linebacker, that top bucket, now is suddenly a little thin for New England. But as we look at Green Bay first and foremost, they still need a wide receiver. They may go with a pass rusher to replace what they lost in Zadarius Smith this offseason. Any other potential moves that you guys think might make sense here for the Packers?
I think that they'd be best served to listen to Aaron. Aaron's been asking for a wide receiver for years now. I mean, he flirted with leaving the franchise this past season. Take Christian Watson. Christian Watson is used to playing in the cold. He's tough. He's physical. He gives them size on the outside. Take Christian Watson.
I'd personally go Boye Mafe, but I think Travis Jones could be really interesting next to Kenny Clark. And so I think that could be an interesting combination.
Well, you got the position right, but not the player. The pick is in. Devontae Wyatt, selected by the Green Bay Packers. So this is a pretty interesting kind of turn of events because as we look at our draft board with our rankings, we were starting to get towards the end of the round here, and I was like, I wonder if we're going to have any of these first-round values that we've handed out that end up making it into day two, and now we're down to just two left in Andrew Booth and Dax Hill. Wyatt was the third to last one, and now he is off the board. So let's talk about Wyatt, his positional versatility that he's had a chance to showcase in that Georgia defensive front, and how that might fit within what the Packers have going for them with their defensive front.
Well, I mean, Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis stole the show at the Combine, but Devontae Wyatt was exceptional. I mean, a really exciting blend of size, length, athleticism, power. I mean, he's an unbelievably explosive pass rusher where he can wreak havoc attacking interior gaps. And, they used him sometimes as a spy to, just drop back and just contain those quarterbacks. We saw him chase down Bryce Young. I mean, this guy is explosive. And so I think this gives them another player in that front seven to go with Kenny Clark, to go with Rashawn Gary, guys that can really force the action and dictate the action. And so I'm surprised that neither of their first two picks, the two first-round picks, are going to help Aaron Rodgers on offense. But maybe this goes back to a little bit what we've talked about, is sometimes you can help your quarterback by playing better defense and not putting as much stress on them to outscore everybody.
I think that's what it is. I think the Packers, they don't plan on scoring many points next year. So they're going to try to stop everybody because I'm totally confused right now.
I'm confused too because they lost MVS in free agency, right? I mean, and Adams, right? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, and to have two first-round picks and to not have taken one receiver, man, it's just confusing for me.
I think this is probably at the mercy of the board, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you guys. They probably should have, in a perfect world, took a receiver, but I mean, look at our board. There's no receiver that's worth any of these picks.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, and I hate to go back to be a homer, but the Saints, they needed a receiver. They moved the board. They went and got one. They needed an offensive tackle. They moved the board. They went and got him. So at what point were they going to be aggressive? And what point does your draft philosophies just become stubbornness, right?
Yeah.
Right. We know you always want to take
Right.
defensive players, but, man, at some point you got to look at your roster and you got to understand, like, you know what? I messed up. Because it's not only do the Packers take defensive players, but some of those guys don't hit. Like, we can go through their past picks, and it's not like they're drafting all pros every single year.
Yeah.
Some of those guys are bust. So I think that's the bigger issue.
How about the Georgia connection for Brian Gutekunst?
Yeah.
Right.
Think about Eric Stokes last year, Quay Walker this year, Devontae Wyatt, height, weight, speed, explosiveness. I mean, I think we have a pattern going into next year of who the Packers like, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and put Jalen Carter or Keely
right.
Ringo. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be a Georgia Bulldog, or they're going to be explosive.
Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
Keep going, right?
Yeah.
So we're now at the position where the New England Patriots are back on.
I need
the
a corner,
clock.
people.
Well, I mean, Kyler Gordon, I think, is somebody who they probably like quite a bit.
Sure.
I could see Kyler Gordon being somebody who would make a
Yeah.
ton of sense for the New England Patriots.
They could have
with
picked
the
him at
first-
21. I don't think any of us here would have.
You would have batted them
batted
out.
up.
Right.
Not with the buzz around them. I mean, versus our individual grades, maybe a little early, but we all kind of expected that range for Kyler Gordon.
Well, and I think I think with Kyler, if he were to be the pick for New England, I mean, they want to play some bump and run and some man coverage, and I think that's the best parts of Kyler Gordon. He's super physical. I love his temperament. He's a really good athlete, and I think that all of that would really blend well with the style of defense and the style of corner that we've seen the Patriots typically go after in the past. And I think he can. I think he does have ball skills. Like, I think he can make plays on the ball. I think he's a little bit underdeveloped in zone where he's a bit of a grass dropper, but I think that can be taught, and the best things that he does are the things that New England covets at the position.
What about Daxton Hill?
Yeah.
Devin McCourty's
How many
older.
safeties can you have?
His contract's expiring as well, and you think they have Kyle Duggar, who's been really good for them.
Jabril Peppers they just signed.
Yes.
Hey, what does
but-
Kyle say? Don't let good players stop you from drafting great players. Is that
Hit me with my
your
own
motto?
quote.
Yeah.
And
I know.
I do say that, yes.
But Daxton also has that. We know he can cover. He can come down in the box. He's that kind of Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
that Bill Belichick loves.
I actually comped Daxton Hill because I think I did the report. I comped him to Devin McCourty.
Yes.
Just in terms of his versatility and
Yeah.
things he could do. I don't hate that.
He could be the reverse of McCourty. McCourty started out as a rookie at corner, had like 7 interceptions. Then they all went downhill and they moved him to safety. Hill could be a guy that it starts out at safety who
Goes to
can play
outside corner.
to
New
the
England's
outside
got
corner.
two major issues in my mind. They have to help their young quarterback, Mac Jones.
Yes.
And you can call me a homer, but they have a Josh Allen problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, they can't stop the guy. And so something with this pick has to do one of those two things,
Yeah.
either help Mac develop or help them compete better against the Bills.
Could it?
See, I don't think that they're really focusing on the rest of the division, as much. Just knowing that franchise and the front office, I think they're more focused on being as good as they can be. But
I don't know about that, Trey.
Is there any Rutgers
No.
players? Bo Melton? What's going on, Kyle?
I don't know about that.
Sky Moore.
He's going to.
talk to me.
He's going guard, isn't he?
I'm not going. It might be a guard. I don't know. With this pick, the New England Patriots have elected to draft Cole Strange,
Oh my!
offensive lineman from Chattanooga, in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft.
This is not real.
What?
Kyle,
Come over here. You tell me
This
what
a dream?
that
Wow.
say right there. Does that say Cole Strange?
They
Cole
have a
Strange, Patriots.
history of doing off the wall things, especially in the draft.
This is pass off the wall.
This is mental gymnastics if I've ever seen
they
it.
could have got him in the third round.
This is thinking you're smarter than.
This is Bill Belichick.
No, but let's say it because Bill Belichick is at that point, right, to where you got to obviously have numerous Super Bowls. Right?
Yes.
But you're at that point to where are you outsmarting?
Is he senile? Like, how old is this man?
Well, here's
70, I think.
Here's the thing.
You're not.
Bill Belichick has developed, and rightfully so, the reputation of a mad scientist who always knows the right buttons to push. But look at the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the roster and tell me with a straight face what they have done in the last 2 off seasons has produced a better football team. And you look at this board, you look at this selection, And I have a really hard time negotiating that. And what's a shame about that is I really like Cole Strange.
Right, in the third round.
I really like, even in the late second round.
Sure.
If you would have told me Tampa Bay would have drafted him in the end of the second round tomorrow, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I would have said that's a great upside pick. But to get it in the first round with the needs that this team has, does this help solve your Josh Allen
problems?
No. Plus to add to it, like they've had so much success in years past of drafting linemen late, right? And developing them into good players and starters. I mean, drafting a third rounder that we had a guy that we had a graded in the third round and drafting in the first round is just totally against the
He's not even a stylistic fit.
I was going to say the same thing.
They're replacing Ted Karras right now.
Yeah, so
you drafted a replacement for Ted Karras.
You think you drafted him as a center, obviously, then, right?
You still have David Andrews on the
roster.
David
Andrews. They got sniped, guys. Jacksonville ruined this pick for them. They wanted Devin Lloyd. There's no other explanation. That's why Jacksonville went up and got their player. And New England said, okay, we're happy with Quay Walker. We're happy with Devin Lloyd. Let's move back. We'll gain some picks. And I said it back when it happened. I was like, they're probably going to get one of those players later on that they would have picked at 21, and we would have never question that player.
So this goes back to the trade back from 21. And what's interesting is we made the observation when they traded back to say, hey, pretty surprising that a team that's lost as much as New England has this offseason decided they didn't want to pick a football player early in the round and wanted to move back.
Right.
We get too cute here?
In this draft, you can't get cute like that.
That's exactly what happened, and it blew back right in their face. And it's time to question Bill Belichick, right? And
absolutely,
it's hard, but it's time to do it, right? Not only from Cole Strange as an evaluation perspective, him, being third round, second round grade, you draft him in the first round, but also just from a team building standpoint. Like I take it as pure arrogance at this point, right? Like that I know this is a good football player that's gonna pan out. Everybody's telling me what I need to do with my team, but I've got 5-6 Super Bowls.
Coach Skarnecki is not here anymore.
No. Tom Brady's not here anymore.
Scar is gone.
Again, but if you look at his history, he makes these kind of wild swings at the wildest moments.
But let me tell you,
he drafted Jordan Richards, who was like a 7th round safety, and
bro, we're still in the first round.
I know. I'm just saying, like, this is kind of what he does.
But it's a lot easier to do it when Tom Brady's your quarterback. You have to be self-aware that you have Mac Jones. You don't have Tom Brady anymore, right?
Exactly.
Like you need to put pieces on your team, and sometimes you need to listen to the outside noise. Because I know that's what coaches like to say, right? Block out the noise, don't listen to the outside noise. Sometimes you need to listen, right? Like you don't have a very good complete football team at this point. This is crazy.
Sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire.
I mean, this has to be the craziest pick I've ever seen. Like, I am shook right now.
I mean, this is up there with the Rashad Penny pick for me from a couple years ago.
I was just about to ask you that. Y'all been doing this a while. Like, what's
it's the same. We're deja vu. We're right back in it, but maybe at a higher level.
You could have drafted Daxton Hill, who's still on the board.
I mean, Boye
Mafe, Arnold Ebiketie.
And the Chiefs are on the clock. But to close this out, Cole Strange would have been a top blank option for New England. How far down the list of players would you have had to get before you're like, oh yeah, Cole Strange?
30, 40 players.
Yeah, at minimum.
I love Cole. You guys know that. I did the presentation. I hyped him up at the Senior Bowl. He was not great at the Senior Bowl. And I remember being like, oh, man, I feel kind of weird about the way I talked about it.
But then you put the tape back on.
Put the tape back on. He's a really good football player, but
we got to look at our board, right? We're talking about first round. Now, tomorrow is the second and third round, so that's when we talk about guys like Scott Moore that they could have drafted, right? Khalil Shakir, Christian Watson, like guys that can help Mac Jones. It's still a bevy of guys that we have second and third round grades that they could have drafted in position of need to help their team.
Chiefs. They're either going Daxton Hill at safety since they lost Tyrann Mathieu, or they're going Arnold Ebiketie.
Well, you got the position right.
Oh, okay.
They are drafting a pass rusher here, and it's George Karlaftis from Purdue, who we heard some buzz may or may not end up getting his name called tonight. But let's talk about Karlaftis a little bit. 6'0", 266 pounds, 32 3/8 on the arms. He does sneak into the back end of the first round. He's a likable player, and he's a really physical player, too. I think that's one of the things that really pops about him. So as I go ahead and put Karlaftis up on the board here, let's talk about what he brings to the AFC West with how much the dynamics of this division have changed this offseason.
Power, ability to reduce rush angles, good run defense, just a high effort, high motor guy. And, I think about the start of was it last season, they're toying with playing Chris Jones on the edge, and that really didn't work out. And, you've pointed out a few times that Frank Clark has not really been reliable and inconsistent. And, they lost Alex Okafor, who I think is a dangling player right now. Melvin Ingram, not around for this football team. So they had a need here at edge, and I think they get a player here that makes a lot of sense for the versatile ways that they'll use their edge rushers. And I like this fit for Kansas City, and I think it's a good spot for Karlaftis to go and really develop at the rate that he can. That makes a lot of sense to me.
He adds toughness and physicality to this front seven overall. And this was something that they've kind of missed for quite some time. They've always been Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. And it's like, well, everybody else, you could just score 42. It doesn't really matter. But now it's like they kind of prioritizing a little bit. Let's play some defense. Let's try something new. It helps. So it's like, I like the pick. I could have gone Daxton Hill, but he does add, especially against the run. They've struggled with the run game for quite a while, it seems like.
Don't forget they signed Jordan Reed, and they have Juan Thornhill at safety, too. I think they're okay there.
Sure. My issue is this, though. They're now playing, in a division with Russell Wilson, Herbert. So being able to get to the passer is something that's very important to him. And George isn't going to be a 10 sack year guy. I probably would have bet on the Trace and went with Boye Mafe just for the upside, right? I mean,
quick pressure.
Yeah.
I agree with Dre. I would have went with Boye Mafe, but I don't hate this pick. I like Karlaftis. He's not the longest, but I think he has some good kind of short area quickness to kind of win early. I think he has some power. He can do some speed to power stuff. Really advanced technical hands, and so I think this is probably around his sweet spot. I still would have went Mafe, but I can't really knock this pick, to say the least.
So we now have Cincinnati on the clock, and we got 2 more picks tonight. You guys look up at the board.
Malik Willis is still on the board.
Malik Willis still on the board. We got Andrew Booth still on the board. We got Dax Hill still on the board. Kyler Gordon.
Yeah.
Nakobe Dean. And there's good football players that are up here.
The Bengals' biggest needs are corner.
Corner, yeah.
Interior defensive line.
Think
they can still use a guard.
I was about to say the same thing, Joe.
I think Bill Belichick took their guy, so they're going to have to look somewhere else.
It's the first round. I say premium spot, so I think they go corner. Booth is still there.
Yeah.
Booth is still here.
Kyler
Gordon is still there.
Can they use Daxton Hill?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Von Bell is going to be a free agent after this season. And obviously, they're still in negotiations with Jesse Bates.
Jesse Bates, yeah.
So Von Bell actually could make a lot. Daxton Hill could make a lot of sense.
That's exactly who the pick is.
Good pick,
Pick is
Cincinnati.
in.
Attaboy.
Daxton Hill selection.
Nice.
Gives the Cincinnati Bengals a chance to try to be a more complete roster. Obviously, the Super Bowl run this year was a lot of fun to watch. A lot of big-time moments. But Daxton Hill gives them a lot of versatility on the back end, and they can use him in a lot of different ways and potentially even athleticism at corner. So we've touched a little bit as we were trying to figure out what this pick was going to be for them, but let's talk about, now that we know this is the pick, how he fits and complements within the AFC North.
Well, I mean, it gives them an option after Von Bell. I don't think they plan on re-signing him after this year, so having a guy like Daxton Hill already in your defense, already in your scheme, to me makes a lot of sense. And 2, they're going to have to get ready to start paying Joe Burrow. Right?
Yeah.
They may not want to invest all that capital in Jesse Bates, who I love. I'm a big fan of Jesse Bates. But if you have an opportunity to get younger and cheaper at safety and allow you to continue to invest money, 1, in your quarterback, and 2, other areas on offense to continue to build around your quarterback, it gives them options. And our board, Daxton Hill is probably the best player available. So, to me, it's a home run pick.
He helps them, like how we talked about Kyle Hamilton being with the Ravens in a division that wants to run the ball. They have to deal with the Ravens run game. They'll have to deal with the Browns run game.
Pittsburgh.
They have to deal with Pittsburgh. And Dax Hill can do this. So it's very similar things. He'll come down and hit those slice blockers, those tight ends, those pullers. He'll be a force player. Then he can also, play on the outside. He gives you kind of 3 safety sets that can allow you to be multiple in your back end, and then your front.
Yep.
So it's like this is a really, to me, this is almost kind of a steal in a way.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, because they are playing against a lot of offenses that run the football, Daxton gives you upside in coverage where he can drop down and play in the slot against 11 personnel, which allows you to keep your base defense on the field, which also will help you to
Maybe
defend
some
and run better.
spies, dealing with Deshaun Watson's mobility, dealing with Lamar Jackson's mobility as well.
Kenny Pickett.
Dealing with Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson, he can help in that realm as well.
So Minnesota on the clock here.
They liked Justin Fields last year. I'm just throwing it out there.
They traded back in, or
No, this is the pick they got from Detroit.
Yeah, from Detroit.
forgot about that deal.
Yep.
Okay.
While I'm rooting for a corner just for financial reasons, but I'd love to see Malik Willis here.
Me too.
Yep, I would agree. And when New Orleans first went up in front of them, and we were on the break, I said, Joe, they got sniped for a quarterback again. That was my first reaction, was New Orleans got in front of them because we knew that they would have made the move for Justin Fields.
That's right.
Now, obviously, they've continued to manipulate the Kirk Cousins contract, so they are at least committed to him in the short term. But for a team that's got a new regime coming in and doesn't have the pressure to, you got to win a playoff game this year or else it's, okay, we can kind of reassess the roster and set some foundation pieces. This is a really good value opportunity in my mind to bring in a player that would probably benefit from not having to start right away.
I think that they should. I think that they should wait to draft quarterbacks so the GM's clock starts a few years later, right? And I think that they have a few more pressing needs than quarterback. They need a corner, like real bad.
Booth.
So Andrew Booth is there still. He's a first-round talent. I think the pick is Booth.
But I think drafting Malik Willis, you can eventually move on from Kirk Cousins, right? Moving on from Kirk Cousins frees up salary cap space for you, right? Then you can go fill out the rest of that team via free agency, and so Malik Willis can play, let's say, in a year or two, whenever you think he's ready. But when Kirk Cousins is off the books, and like I said, you can fill out the rest of that team. So
And you're gonna have to pay Justin Jefferson big money soon. Like it's not like just 3 years down the line. Like, it's coming up that he's gonna want his money, and having a Malik Willis in that rookie contract is gonna help be able to give Justin Jefferson the money that not only he wants but he deserves.
So we are still waiting on the pick, but this night has just flown by. The first 10 were interesting, but it wasn't the same flavor that we've gotten from 11 through 31. I think the last 20 picks have been everything you could have possibly expected from an unpredictability standpoint in this year's class, and then some.
It was like
RIP to my mock draft. I don't even want to think about it.
Oh yeah, these mock drafts are basically
I didn't
like
do one this year, I think.
the March.
Nobody. I certainly did.
These mock drafts are essentially the March Madness bracket. It's just been busted. Like once we got in the top 10, it was a wrap.
I have had a chance to just check in on them every now and again. There are a couple guys in the upper 40s from a score perspective, which is historically a pretty strong showing. So
I'm sure I'm not one of them.
I had no comment. No comment to you. But as we wait on this last pick to come in, and you start thinking about storylines for tomorrow, obviously we've got to recalibrate as far as the new order with some moves that were happening and some trades that have already happened and reshuffled some of those early picks. You guys look up at the board, and we've mentioned Andrew Booth. That is the only player that we gave a consensus first-round valuation to that is still here. But what other storylines are visually told to you by that draft board and the players that are available?
One quarterback taken.
I can't believe the NFL really didn't do it.
Yep.
They didn't reach. You know what I mean? And I kind of started to talk myself into that. Like, the NFL always does this. They picked E.J. Manuel and Blake Bortles and Blaine Gabbert and Christian Ponder. The list goes on. And they had another opportunity to do it. There's the need exists, and they stayed disciplined, to Keith's point.
I think my storyline is we're going to see some names, some offensive linemen early in the second round that we are going to be shocked to go. I think we could see, Abraham Lucas go in the first 6 picks tomorrow. Look at the board. There's no offensive tackles left. There's 0.
I think we're just going to be a nice run on the edge. Arnold Ebiketie, Boy Mafe, You think about guys like Josh Pascal.
Well, and also David Ajabo
David
is somebody for
Ajabo,
some of
yeah.
those teams that have not been competitive in the last couple of years who might not have pressure if they're in rebuilding situations. He's going to be there.
I'm interested to see when the running back run start, right? Because there were whispers that the Bills are going to.
But they were the only team. That's what talked me out of it.
Weird about it.
You can't just be the only spot. You know?
Pick is in.
When does it start, right? When does it start? In
The pick is in.
The Minnesota Vikings have drafted a defensive back
Let's go.
with their last selection.
Get them.
Brentley, I'm sorry to tell you, it is not a corner.
Oh, no.
Rough.
It is a safety.
Rough.
Lewis Seen, Georgia Bulldogs. He sneaks in at 32. Obviously, Harrison Smith still there.
Wow.
Getting a little bit older. This is an electric speed athlete, big-time hitter. Let's think about this pick of Lewis Seen and what he brings to Minnesota's defense.
It's going to be a lot of penalties from their secondary with him and Harrison Smith, two physical, violent, tough players. Seen will probably play more down, and Harrison will be deep more. But a very good player, man. I like this pick for him. Day one starter.
Yeah, we had a second round valuation on him, but he was somebody who I couldn't help but fall in love with when you watched him play. And it's funny, you watch that Georgia defensive front or Georgia defense, and you're looking in the front, and then you get to the back seven, and holy cow, this guy's a stud too. So he was a pleasant surprise for us when we got into him in the cross-check process. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back for a 10-minute recap of the first round. Storylines kind of set the table for tomorrow. So everybody, let's take a nice little breath here. All 32 in the books, and we'll put a bow on it in just a minute. Welcome back to the Draft Network's draft room, courtesy of the beautiful Draft House here in Las Vegas. The first round is in the books. And we have collectively taken our big exhale and tried to process all 32 picks. This is fun, right? We spend all year prepping for this, and now we get a chance to kind of survey the landscapes. What I'd like to do is start with some of our best available players after the first round. And we've already made a big mention of Andrew Booth, but linebacker Nakobe Dean of Georgia also pops big time. We mentioned David Ajabo as a very talented pass rusher with an injury. Toolsy defensive lineman DeMarvin Leal, somebody who we probably won't have to wait too long to see based on his tools, but he's got to be able to put it all together. Jaquan Brisker from Penn State is a big-time playmaker. We did see some safety action here in the first round. And then our next 5 would be Isaiah Spiller, running back A&M, quarterback Malik Willis from Liberty, Desmond Ritter, quarterback Cincinnati, Perion Winfrey, defensive lineman from Oklahoma, and Boye Mafe, edge rusher from Minnesota. So you guys hear those 10 names. Who surprises you the most that did not get their name called, and why was it Malik Willis?
Right.
That's Malik, right? I mean, that's the guy. That's the player that we knew that there was definitely some development needed there, just kind of based on his college career playing at Liberty, the scheme, and those types of things. But I mean, just the physical gifts are off the charts. The mobility, he's got good size, he's got a big time arm, and I just felt like, hey, he's a great dude, right? Yeah. Somebody you definitely feel comfortable coming in, being the leader of your organization. You think somebody would have pulled the trigger, and I think someone's going to get a steal tomorrow.
Especially in the first round, being able to have that 5th-year option. Like you want to let him sit for a year or so, and you still have those extra 3 years of cap control with him rather than drafting him later on. And his contract's going to end a lot sooner than it will in the first round.
I'm kind of predicting, what if we see a team that has a legit quarterback? You say, hey, this is an asset. I'm going to take him.
Yeah.
Like, this is the second round.
I got an idea.
Like, why wouldn't you do that, right?
Yeah.
And you think about who the team's picking at the top of the draft. I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, the Jets, they have too many needs. But just a team, in that top 10 of the second round who might have a quarterback already, I would take him and try to flip him.
The Detroit Lions are certainly a team to watch with the second pick at around 2. I think it could be them.
They moved that pick as part of that trade.
They did.
Atlanta, Seattle.
Atlanta.
Those are teams picking in the 40s.
What about
those teams who passed in the top 10 have got to be thrilled with what they're sitting here looking at right now.
The Colts, are they like 42 or 44 somewhere in the second round?
who owns pick 33? Obviously, I think Jacksonville made that trade. You got Tennessee.
Tampa Bay.
Jacksonville traded up with Tampa Bay for that spot.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa's looking to move out of that for a team obviously looking to get Malik Willis.
So, and here's the money thing, right? There's no better pick on Friday night than 33 when everybody gets a chance to reset their boards, talk about it overnight, and start to strategize, okay, who are the guys that we have that are can't-miss values that are still here on the board? And with the quarterbacks that didn't run, I'd be really fascinated if this does become open season for Tampa Bay, who, I mean, let's be honest, they don't really need to pick here at 33. I mean, they're a well-established roster. Cole Strange in the second round probably would have been somebody who would have made a lot of sense for them. But there's going to be opportunities for them to try to maximize this asset and parlay it into more assets based on how the board fell, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if I'm Tampa, it's like I don't want to get too much into NFTs, but it's like what if you draft Malik Willis? Mm-hmm. What if they say, hey, we don't like your offer? I'm like, we're going to take Malik Willis and let's call my bluff. And then Malik Willis is that much more valuable than just the asset of pick 33. You see what I'm saying? And so it's going to be fascinating.
I think that'll be tough, though, because they took Kyle Trask early.
I'm saying they take Malik Willis with the intent to trade him.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, I was gonna talk about the edges, right? Because I think a lot of us thought Boye Mafe, Arnold Ebiketie, and then just in the history of the draft, right? Like we seen, was that last year with the Bucks drafting Drew Tryon, then we've seen in the past with the Saints, they like Houston edge defenders for some reason. And I thought that we would see just those guys being premium positions, see a run on those guys towards the end of the draft, but it wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, that Logan Hall name was one that we heard might sneak in pretty consistently in the last couple weeks, pushing up into the end of the first round, and that did not happen. So Minnesota could have been a perfectly good spot for him too. When you think about kind of the turnover that they've had and the challenges that they've had with their defensive ends and Danielle Hunter and his health, and so. Keith, I agree with you. I think that's a great call, and I think that's one of the sweet spots. Obviously, we have better ranked prospects at other positions, but I think the early edge group is one of the better ones that is still on the board here for the start of the round.
Question, with the way that we only have one quarterback go round one, the rest of these guys are available in round two. How does that affect the running backs? Because that's going to push them down, in my opinion, even further. Because some of the teams that you look at, like in Atlanta, who doesn't have an established, not established, but a running back of the future, I looked at them as like a sweet spot for the first available back for Arthur Smith's offense. These quarterbacks, Malik, Desmond, Sam Howell, Matt Corral, all four of those guys are still being available in the second round. That can potentially push these running backs into round three, and the run won't start as soon as some really predicted.
Yeah, I know, Keith, you had mentioned earlier being fascinated about where the running back run starts. And I mean, there's good ball carriers here. I think the challenge, as you can see on the board, is how busy and stacked the third and fourth rounds are as far as the valuations that are available to you. And that becomes the challenge, right? Is why would I be drafting a guy in the top 40 or the top 50 when I know this entire logjam, find me a more busy area on the board from a value perspective than the late day 2, early day 3 bucket of backs. And that economics proposition is always one that challenges teams to kind of make that decision. And we'll ultimately see when that jump starts. But as we get ready to close things up today, I want to go through, I'm going to count, because again, not a math guy, but I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams with multiple picks in the first round. I'm going to read them all to you, and I want you guys to tell me which one you like the most and which one you like the least. New Orleans, Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. Nice 1-2 punch. Green Bay, Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. The New York Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. Detroit, Aidan Hutchinson and Jamison Williams. Kansas City, Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. Houston, Derek Stingley and Kenyon Green. Jacksonville, Trayvon Walker and Devin Lloyd. The New York Jets, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson and Jermaine Johnson. And Baltimore, Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum. Was that 9?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll say Detroit was my favorite. I mean, you get Aidan Hutchinson, who I think is the best player in the draft. You get Jamison Williams, who I think is one of the 10 best players in the draft, and you got him after trading up, and you were owning pick 32, and I thought it was a really good trade for Detroit in terms of not really having to give up that much to go from 32. It's kind of the middle of the first round, where we've seen teams go, New Orleans, when they went up for Marcus Davenport, 27-14, it cost them a 1 and a 5. I feel like Detroit came away with 2 blue chip talents in this draft, and they didn't have 2 blue chip picks, if that makes sense.
And they got plus value on the trade.
Unbelievable.
Too.
Right.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Right. And so for me, they were my second team. The team that I was the most impressed with was the New York Jets. I think that they got 3 starters, right? When you think of Sauce Gardner, who's actually a great fit for what they do defensively, and then Garrett and Jermaine, who was predicted to go within the top 10. I thought they were able to get 3 plug-in starters, and they're off to a great start.
I agree. I was going to go with the Jets as well. I mean, you think about just the players they got and the positions of need that they had coming into the draft. You get Sauce Gardner, who, at the time we didn't really like him at 4, but now we have the beneficiary of hindsight, and we saw who they were able to get later. It's a great pick. It really is. They get a number 1 corner for that defense. They're able to come back around and get Garrett Wilson, who was my number 1 wide receiver. And then you get Jermaine Johnson at pick 26, I think, and who we thought he could be a candidate at 4. And so the debate with the Jets was, hey, what's the deal with Mekhi Becton and George Fant? And, are we going to add Ikem Ekwonu and to that mix? Well, they're telling us, hey, they're comfortable with those 2 tackles. And if they're comfortable with those 2 tackles, this is absolutely a home run draft.
I'm gonna go with the New York Giants. I think that they went back to the basics, man, and it's just the trenches, right? Like, and they came away with 2 guys that we thought would possibly be number 1 overall picks at 5 and 7,
yes,
and possibly the best player at their position, right? You may have walked away with the number 1 offensive tackle and the number 1 edge rusher. So I think, like I said, the New York Giants, they got back to the basics. They stopped betting on things and, potential and things like that. And it's just guys that have really high upside, but they also have really high floors as football players too.
Yeah, I like what Jacksonville did. Getting Trayvon Walker, moving back up and getting Devin Lloyd, you prioritizing that defense, and in that realm, that front 7, getting athleticism, getting physicality, and then also getting versatility, because we know how versatile Trayvon Walker is, but we also know that Devin Lloyd can play as a edge pass rusher on passing downs and drop off in the coverage and blitz through the A gap. I just love the athleticism, the versatility and fluidity that they'll have to be able to move those guys around defensively.
And I'll point to Baltimore, who came into the night with the first pick being 14th and not having a second first-round pick in the round to start, and they end up walking away with Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum, who are 2 of my personal top 12 players in this year's draft class. And to be able to get that kind of haul when you started the night with 14 and 14 alone is an awesome job. And I think they did an awesome job with the Hollywood Brown trade, only giving up a 3 to turn that into a 1. I think with how Hollywood Brown's career has gone to this point, they got plus value for him as a player. So DaCosta, I thought, worked his tail off tonight, and I think he did a phenomenal job. Yeah. We'll see who follows up night 1 with a night 2 win tomorrow. And a reminder to draft fans everywhere, the draft is not 1 round long, it's 7. So if you didn't love what your team did tonight, like we didn't love for some teams, you got 6 more rounds starting tomorrow night to get back on the horse. And we hope everybody enjoyed the chance to sit in with the Draft Network's scouting draft room here at the TDN Draft House here in Las Vegas. We hope you guys will join us again tomorrow night as we continue this trek through the 2022 NFL Draft. Thanks for watching.